Hey everyone, and welcome! So glad you're here. Go ahead, make yourselves completely at home. Today, we're not just looking back at history. We're stepping right into it, diving deep into something truly chilling. A hidden fear that medieval people grappled with long before those iconic beaked masks even appeared on the scene. This isn't the story you usually hear. It's a narrative that peels back the comforting layers of myth to reveal something much more visceral, something that gets under your skin. If this kind of immersive journey into the past sounds like your thing, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your engagement really helps us bring these stories to life. Alright, let's drop in. The year is 1347. You find yourself at the bustling docks of Messina, Sicily, a vibrant gateway between east and west. The sun, though weak and watery, struggles to warm the crisp autumn air that whips around the masts of the docked ships. Around you, the atmosphere isn't just seen or heard, it's thick, a heavy, almost tangible blanket woven from 1,000 different threads. First, your nose is assaulted by the dominant, almost overwhelming perfume of the harbor. Rich, exotic spices from distant, sun-drenched lands. Cinnamon, clove, pepper, spilling from torn sacks, unloaded from colossal merchant ships, now rocking gently against the creaking wooden piers. It's a profoundly sweet, almost cloying scent, a potent promise of wealth, far-off adventure, and luxurious living. You instinctively take a deeper breath, trying to savor this powerful, intoxicating aroma, letting it fill your lungs. But then, just as quickly, something else cuts through that intoxicating sweetness. Something sharp, acrid, and deeply unsettling. It's subtle at first, barely a whisper beneath the clamor in the spices. A faint, metallic undertone, like rotten fruit left too long in the sun or stagnant water festering in a forgotten barrel. You wrinkle your nose, trying to identify it, dismiss it. But it persists, deepening, mutating into a cloying, sickly sweetness that most certainly isn't from the precious cargo. It's the distinct, unmistakable smell of something fundamentally wrong, something decaying beneath the surface, trying to hide. You instinctively turn your head, your nostrils flaring, trying to pinpoint the source. But the scent drifts, elusive, carried on the damp sea breeze. It seems to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. You watch the people around you, burly porters hauling massive sacks onto carts, their backs bent, sweat beading on their brows, but their faces are strangely tight, their eyes darting nervously towards the ships, towards the shadowy corners of the warehouse. A woman hurries past, pulling a coarse wool shawl even tighter around her mouth and nose, her gaze fixed rigidly on the uneven cobblestones beneath her feet, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Nobody here seems to truly smile. There's a palpable tension in the crowded air, a silent, unspoken agreement not to acknowledge the creeping chill that has nothing to do with the autumn weather. You step carefully over a tangled mess of ropes, past open crates overflowing with vibrant silks and dried figs, past barrels of salted fish and pungent cheeses. The sweet and the sour, the fresh and the stale all mingle in your nose, creating a disorienting symphony of smells. The market stalls buzz with muffled chatter, hushed negotiations, but every now and then, a dry, rasping cough echoes too loudly from the shadows, or someone quickly turns their back, disappearing into the maze of alleys. The air, despite its rich, exotic perfume, feels heavy, as if the entire city is holding its breath, waiting for an unseen shoe to drop. You're still moving through the narrow, twisting streets of Messina, the fading scent of exotic spices now battling the underlying stench of decay that clings stubbornly to the air, a constant, unsettling counterpoint. The clamor of the port slowly recedes, replaced by the tighter, more intimate sounds of a residential district. Here, the air carries the faint smell of wood smoke from hearths, mixed with baking bread and the earthier tang of damp stone. A dog barks somewhere nearby. The rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer rings in the distance, and the murmuring chatter of daily life forms a constant, familiar backdrop, a reassuring hum. Then, piercing through this everyday symphony, you hear it. A slight, unassuming sound. A cough. It's nothing remarkable, just a single, dry hack from an open window above you, barely registering in the tapestry of street noise. Someone clearing their throat, perhaps, or a common seasonal ailment that everyone shrugs off during the colder months. You don't even pause in your stride. Life in medieval times is a constant battle against chills, damp, and sickness. A cough is as normal as the creak of wooden carts or the distant cry of a hawker. You've probably heard 100 like it already today without a second thought. But then, as you turn a corner, another cough sounds. Closer this time, and it feels different. It's a little deeper, a little wetter, and it catches your ear because it seems to come from a young child, no older than 7, playing with a wooden hoop in the dusty street. The child stops, clenches their small fist against their chest for a moment, a spasm of discomfort crossing their young face, and then, with a determined shake of their head, they resume their game, seemingly unfazed. You notice a woman watching from a nearby doorway, her hands clasped tightly together, her expression unreadable, a faint worry line etched between her brows. A slight, inexplicable shiver, definitely not from the chill in the air, traces its way up your spine. As you continue your path deeper into the city's labyrinthine heart, the coughs begin to multiply. They aren't isolated incidents anymore. A harsh, rattling cough erupts from a shadowed alleyway, surprisingly loud in the relative quiet. It's followed quickly by another, then a series of short, sharp barks from inside a tavern you pass, the sounds muffled but distinct behind its heavy wooden door. These aren't the casual throat clearings or minor irritations of before. These are insistent, forceful expulsions of air, sounds that carry a desperate note of struggle, a deep vibration in the chest, a frantic attempt to dislodge something unseen and unwelcome. The very rhythm of the street shifts subtly. The casual hum of conversation seems to dip and rise around these emerging intrusive sounds. Like waves parting for an unseen obstacle, you start to notice the way people around you react. A merchant, deeply engrossed in haggling over prices with a customer, suddenly cuts himself off mid-sentence, his voice trailing off as his eyes flick nervously towards a doorway where a particularly violent fit of coughing has just erupted. He pulls his coarse wool scarf higher, almost unconsciously, as if to ward off a chill that isn't there. A group of women carrying heavy water jars quicken their pace along the uneven cobblestones, their heads down, their gazes resolutely avoiding anyone who might be struggling, their shoulders hunched in a gesture of retreat. The familiar sound, once so unremarkable it was ignored, has now transformed into a siren, a quiet alarm bell tolling across the city, claiming everyone's attention. The very air seems to thicken with this growing cacophony of coughs. You find yourself tensing every time you hear it, your shoulders drawing up, your breath held just a little longer than necessary, your ears acutely tuned. It's no longer just a cough. You're navigating the familiar, winding alleys of Messina, but now everything feels sharper, colder. The subtle fear that lingered just days ago has hardened into something more definite, more chilling. The air still holds a faint, cloying sweetness, a ghost of spices, but it's now thoroughly overshadowed by the increasing stench of decay, a sour, undeniable presence. The coughs you heard yesterday have not gone away. If anything, they've multiplied, more urgent, more frequent, echoing from closed windows and behind bolted doors. The streets are emptier now, the usual bustling crowds thin to anxious figures hurrying with averted eyes. As you turn a sharp corner, you stop dead. Before you, a heavy wooden door, once painted a cheerful blue, now stands defaced, brutalized. Thick, rough planks of unvarnished wood have been nailed horizontally across its entire surface, sealing it shut. The nails are driven deep, their metal heads glinting dully in the sparse sunlight, securing the planks with an unnerving finality. This isn't just a closed door. It's a tomb. It's a declaration. You feel an inexplicable pull to approach it, a morbid curiosity overriding your burgeoning sense of dread. Your fingers, almost without conscious command, reach out. The wood is coarse beneath your fingertips, splintered in places, not smoothed by polish or wear. You can feel the sharp edges where the axe had split the grain, the unevenness of the surface, rough and unyielding. It's cold to the touch, carrying the lingering dampness of the morning air, but also something else, an invisible residue of despair, a chilling silence that emanates from behind the impenetrable barrier. You trace the line of a plank, feeling the resistance, the absolute impossibility of entry or escape. This isn't just timber. It's a tangible symbol of isolation, a crude, desperate attempt to contain an unseen enemy, or perhaps to contain those trapped within. Your hand pulls back instinctively, a sudden wave of nausea washing over you. You notice a faint, chalky cross scrawled on one of the upper planks, a crude, hasty mark. It's not a symbol of faith here. It's a warning, a desperate plea, a final judgment. The sheer starkness of it makes your breath catch in your throat. You glance around. The few people who pass by avert their eyes, quickening their pace, their faces grim and uncommunicative. They don't acknowledge your presence or the presence of the boarded-up house. They just want to get past it, to pretend it isn't there, to outrun the silent, creeping certainty that hangs in the air. And as you stand there, staring at that impenetrable door, a cold, clammy sweat breaks out on your palms, prickling your forehead. It's not from exertion, not from the temperature. It's the texture of pure, unadulterated fear. A primal, suffocating panic begins to bubble up. A visceral understanding that this isn't just about sickness. It's about confinement, about abandonment, about being sealed off from the world, left to face an invisible horror alone. The rough wood, the metallic taste of fear in your mouth, the sudden tightness in your chest, it all presses in. You realize that medieval people didn't just fear death. They feared this isolation, this silent public condemnation, this terrible, palpable touch of human desperation, nailed up for all to see, a stark monument to what truly happens when the world decides to lock you away from itself. You're no longer standing by the boarded-up house. You've moved through the city's increasingly tense arteries, leaving the chilling image of that sealed-off home behind. But not the feeling it evoked. The stench of decay seems to have permeated everything now, even the air in the seemingly more prosperous districts. Here, the buildings are grander, the cobblestones smoother, but the silence is deeper, more profound. A stark absence of the usual clamor of servants and bustling activity. As you round a sweeping archway, you catch sight of a small, hurried tableau unfolding near what appears to be a private dock, separated from the common shipping lanes. A figure, richly dressed in heavy velvet and fine linen, his hands adorned with rings that catch the dim light, stands before a gruff-looking man in a simple tunic, likely a dockmaster or gatekeeper. The wealthy man's face is etched with a desperate urgency, his eyes wide and darting, his entire posture conveying a frantic need. Your gaze is drawn to his hand. It's shaking ever so slightly as he extends it, revealing not one, but several gleaming gold coins. They lie heavy and inert in his open palm, catching the weak sun, promising immense value, a shimmering testament to earthly power. You can almost feel the smooth, cold metal yourself, the satisfying weight that usually commands instant obedience, buys passage, secures favors, and smooths over any difficulty. It's the color of luxury, the symbol of control, the very essence of human ambition and security in this world. The man in velvet gestures wildly towards a small, elegant private ship, bobbing restlessly in the harbor, its sails neatly furled, almost ready to depart. He points, he pleads with his eyes, his entire being crying out for escape. He clearly believes these precious discs of metal can buy him freedom, safety, a swift passage away from the tightening grip of fear that has settled over Messina. You can almost hear the unsaid words. Take it all, just let me go. The dockmaster, however, doesn't even reach out. His expression remains utterly impassive, a stony mask. You watch as his gaze flicks from the shimmering gold to the merchant's frantic face, then slowly, deliberately, towards the distant, open sea, and finally, back to the city itself. There's a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a gesture of quiet, unyielding refusal. It's not a refusal born of honesty or virtue, but something deeper, more chilling. His eyes hold a profound weariness, a knowledge that transcends the glitter of coins. The merchant's hand drops, the gold clinking dully against itself, a hollow, almost mocking sound in the sudden stillness. The vibrant color of his fine clothes seems to lose its luster in that moment, his posture slumping, all his outward confidence draining away, replaced by raw, naked fear. The weight of his gold, once a symbol of his power, now becomes the heavy, crushing realization of his utter powerlessness. You sense the terrifying truth. A coin can buy a passage, yes, but it cannot buy immunity from the unseen horror that rides the very winds. It cannot buy protection from a sickness that cares nothing for social standing or the depth of one's coffers. And as you watch the despair wash over the wealthy man's face, you understand that in the face of true, indiscriminate terror, all the gold in the world becomes nothing more than cold, useless metal, unable to stop the inevitable, unable to buy what truly matters. Another day of healthy, unburdened breath. The city breathes differently now. Days have passed since you last walked these streets, and the subtle dread has deepened into an almost tangible shroud. The stench of decay still lingers, a constant, sickly companion, but something else has changed, something far more unsettling. You step out into what should be a bustling mid-morning in Messina, but instead, you are met with an emptiness that chills you more profoundly than any icy wind. The first thing that strikes you isn't a sound at all, but its absence. The air is unnaturally still, a profound hush that presses in on your ears, making them strain for any familiar noise. You realize, with a sudden jolt, what's missing. The usual chorus of sparrows that perch on every rooftop and dart between the eaves. They are gone. No cheerful chirping, no fluttering wings. The sky, usually dotted with their quick movements, feels strangely vacant. Then you notice the absence of other, more human sounds. The distant, playful shouts of children chasing each other through narrow alleys, their laughter echoing off ancient stone walls, completely absent. The rhythmic clatter of a wooden cart on cobblestones, the insistent cries of street hawkers selling their wares, the casual chatter of neighbors exchanging gossip over market stalls, all gone, swallowed by an unnerving quiet. Even the usual low murmur of the harbor, a constant thrum of activity, has faded to a barely audible whisper, a ghost of its former self. You find yourself walking more slowly, your own footsteps on the uneven pavement suddenly sounding shockingly loud, an intrusion in this new, oppressive silence. Each creak of an old shutter, each rustle of dry leaves skittering across the street, seems amplified, stark, and out of place. You instinctively hold your breath, as if your own breathing might disturb this fragile, fearful stillness. The usual vibrant life force of the city has been drained away, leaving behind a hollow echo. You pass by houses with their doors tightly shut, windows dark and uninviting. You catch glimpses of figures through cracks in curtains. A woman staring out blankly, her face gaunt. A man standing motionless in a doorway, his hands clasped, his gaze fixed on nothing. No one calls out greetings. No one seems to notice you. The few people you do see in the streets move with a strange, unnatural swiftness, their heads down, their shoulders hunched, almost as if they're trying to glide silently through the landscape, disturbing nothing, drawing no attention. They are like shadows, ephemeral and afraid. The silence isn't peaceful. It's thick with unexpressed fear, a heavy blanket woven from unspoken anxieties. It tells a story far more terrifying than any shouted warning or visible calamity. It speaks of closed doors, of families huddled in fear, of the sick isolated in their homes, and of the dead taken away in quiet, hurried movements. You realize that this profound silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the deafening proof of life withdrawing, of joy extinguished, of a community holding its collective breath, waiting for an unseen silent reaper. This is the medieval fear, stripped bare, not just the pain of sickness, but the crushing, isolating quiet that follows, marking the places where life used to be vibrant and loud, now only hollowed out, waiting. The oppressive silence of Messina still clings to you, a cold, heavy blanket over the city. You move through streets that once bustled, now hollowed out, ghost-like. The absence of children's laughter, of market shouts, of birdsong, it all presses in. But then, cutting through this suffocating quiet, you hear it, a low, resonant thrum. It's distant at first, a single, deep clang that reverberates through the ancient stones, echoing off the empty walls of a forgotten alley. It's the sound of a church bell, but not one marking the hour or calling to prayer. This is a funeral knell, slow and deliberate. You stop, holding your breath, listening intently. Another beat of silence then. Ong. The sound hangs in the air, thick and heavy like the decay itself. You recognize its somber rhythm, its mournful purpose. This is the bell tolling for the dead. A shudder runs through you, a physical response to the solemn pronouncement. You had heard bells before, of course, marking a passing, but never like this, never in this silence. As you walk, the intervals between the tolls shrink. From one distant dong you begin to pick up others. A slightly higher-pitched bell from another parish joins the chorus. Dong, dong, dong. It's not a melodic harmony, but a disjointed, mournful conversation across the city. Each clang feels like a hammer blow, not on metal, but on your very spirit. The sound travels through the deserted squares, bounces off the closed shops, and enters the tightly shut windows of homes where fear and sickness now reside. The rhythm of the city is no longer defined by merchants or craftsmen or even the sea. It is now measured by these relentless tolls. You pass a small square where a few figures, cloaked and hooded, quickly load something onto a simple cart. Their movements are furtive, their faces obscured, but their haste is clear. And as they do, another bell sounds, closer this time, heavier. Dong! It vibrates through the ground beneath your feet. You see a man pause, his hand instinctively going to his chest, his head bowing for a brief, heavy moment, before he pushes on, his task grimly unfinished. The monotony begins to set in. The bells don't stop. They become a constant, low thrum, a perpetual dirge that replaces all other sound. It's not just background noise, it's the new pulse of Messina. Every beat, every mournful clang is a fresh reminder, a tally mark in an ever-growing ledger of loss. You find yourself anticipating the next toll, your ears now so accustomed to the somber rhythm that its momentary absence, however brief, feels more jarring than its presence. It's a sound that doesn't just announce death, it embodies the city's surrender to it. You realize that this isn't just a custom, a ritual for the departed. This incessant, grinding sound is the city itself screaming, crying out its agony in a language understood by all. It's the collective heartbeat of a dying populace, each dong a beat of a weary, breaking heart. This wasn't the sound of prayer or solace. It was the sound of relentless, inescapable dread. It's the medieval fear made audible, the sheer, overwhelming scale of death, a continuous, mournful drumbeat that tells you, without a single word, that life as you know it is being systematically erased, one toll at a time. The city's grim monotony, punctuated by the relentless tolling of bells, has settled deep within you. The silence is now a weight, and the pervasive scent of decay has sharpened, no longer subtle. You find yourself in a quieter part of Messina, near a communal well, where a few desperate figures still gather for water, their movements slow and wary. The fear here is not just in the air, it's etched on every face, a visible burden. You watch a young man, barely out of boyhood, approach the well, his movements unusually stiff, his right arm held awkwardly close to his side. He lowers his bucket, his back to you, and as he leans forward, the thin fabric of his tunic strains tautly across his neck and jawline. You notice, with a sudden, sickening jolt, an unnatural bulge, a distinct swelling just beneath his ear where his neck meets his shoulder. It's impossible to ignore. It's too large, too prominent, a grotesque purplish-black mound pushing out from beneath the skin. It looks like a bruised, overripe plum has been forcibly shoved beneath his flesh, distorting the natural line of his neck. Your eyes are drawn to it, unable to look away, repulsed, yet morbidly fascinated. The skin over it appears stretched, shiny, almost translucent in places, as if it's about to give way. You can almost feel the heat radiating from it, the intense pressure it must be exerting from within. As he turns slightly, trying to lift his heavy bucket, his face contorts, not just from the effort. A sharp gasp escapes his lips, barely audible, and his left hand instinctively flies up, hovering inches from the swelling. He doesn't dare touch it, you realize. Not truly. His fingers tremble, poised in the air, a silent testament to the exquisite, unbearable tenderness that must reside within that hideous growth. You can see the fear in his eyes, a raw, animal terror as he glances around, checking if anyone else has noticed. He tries to pull his tunic higher, to cover it, but the swelling is too large, too defiant, too much a part of him now to be hidden. The air around him seems to shimmer with his pain, with the immense, unseen pressure building beneath his skin. You imagine the fiery ache, The throbbing pulse within that distended flesh, a foreign entity asserting its dominance over his body. It's a betrayal of the flesh, a grotesque flag announcing an internal war, a visible manifestation of the unseen horror consuming him from the inside out. This isn't just a lump. It's a living, growing, visible marker, a public declaration of a fate that no one can deny or hide from. You watch him struggle away from the well, his bucket half full, his steps slow and deliberate, each movement a careful negotiation with the burgeoning pain in his body. The other people at the well quickly turn their backs, pretending not to have seen, their faces grim, their own hands perhaps instinctively touching their necks or armpits. A silent, terrified check. You feel a cold dread seep into your bones. This isn't the masked, mysterious horror of a plague doctor. This is the intimate, physical terror of your own body turning against you, outwardly displaying the invisible internal rot, a sign that the end has truly begun, not with a whisper, but with a terrifying, undeniable swelling that betrays everything. This visible corruption is the true medieval fear, the physical embodiment of death, growing on you for all to see. You navigate the hushed, dread-soaked streets of Messina, the constant, somber tolling of the bells, a perpetual thrum beneath the terrifying silence of the living. The stench of decay is now a permanent resident in the air, a thick, cloying presence that even the keenest nose can no longer escape. You find yourself drawn towards a small, unadorned house, its door slightly ajar, a sliver of candlelight visible within. The sound of faint, ragged breathing issues from the opening, along with something else, a new and arresting smell. You step across the threshold, into a tiny, stifling room, and the first thing that assaults your senses is a sharp, acidic tang. It's the overwhelming scent of vinegar, so potent it makes your eyes water, almost burning your nostrils. Beneath that, struggling to assert itself, is a complex, pungent mix of dried herbs, the earthy bitterness of rue, the sharp, clean notes of rosemary, perhaps a hint of wormwood. These powerful, seemingly protective aromas are layered over the insidious, underlying odor you've come to recognize, the sickly sweet, unmistakable scent of human decay. A figure in simple, though clean, robes bends over a straw palliasse on the floor. This isn't the grand, imposing physician of later imaginings. This is a healer, perhaps a barber surgeon or an apothecary. His brow furrowed with deep worry, his face pale and drawn. His hands, though gentle in their movements, carry a distinct air of frustrated hesitancy. On the palliasse, a young woman shivers uncontrollably beneath a rough wool blanket, her breath coming in shallow, desperate gasps. You catch a glimpse of her arm, mottled and bruised, a dark, angry bubo throbbing visibly in her armpit, a grotesque, purplish lump that seems to pulse with a life of its own. The healer dips a cloth into a basin of strong-smelling liquid, likely more vinegar or a potent herbal concoction, then carefully, almost tenderly, dabs at the patient's overheated forehead. His lips move, murmuring something, not words you can decipher, but a low, desperate sound, more an incantation or a plea than a confident medical pronouncement. His eyes, though focused on his task, betray a profound weariness, a grim knowledge of the futility of his efforts. Each motion he makes seems measured, ritualistic, yet utterly devoid of true conviction, as if he is performing a charade, going through motions he knows will ultimately fail. In a darkened corner of the room, another figure, an older woman, perhaps the patient's mother, kneels on the cold earth floor. Her back is to you, but you can feel the intensity of her focus. Her rosary beads slip through trembling fingers, the soft clicks audible in the oppressive quiet. Her lips move constantly, silently, forming prayers, her gaze fixed not on the healer or the suffering girl, but on a crude wooden crucifix nailed to the crumbling plaster wall. Her face is tear-streaked, yes, but her posture holds a strange, desperate resolution. She understands, as the healer surely does, that the herbs and vinegar, the ointments and poultices, are now only performative gestures against an unstoppable force. You realize, as the strong, bitter scent of the remedies fills the air, mingling with the heavier scent of sickness, that the real medicine in this stifling room isn't what the healer applies to the skin. It's the desperate, hopeful whispers directed towards a higher power, the fervent appeals to a mercy that feels increasingly distant. In these terrifying times, when faced with an enemy so absolute, so incomprehensible, the only true comfort, the only perceived action left, becomes an appeal to the divine. This is the medieval fear, brought home to its core, the agonizing helplessness of watching a loved one succumb, of realizing that human knowledge and skill are utterly powerless, leaving nothing but prayer as the last, desperate act against an invisible, merciless foe. The constant, mournful tolling of the bells has become the inescapable soundtrack of Messina, a grim rhythm that underlies the profound silence of a city stripped of its life. The air remains heavy with the pervasive scent of decay, a bitter counterpoint to the fading memory of spices. Days stretch into a bleak monotony, and a new, insidious element has crept into the very fabric of existence, affecting even the most basic human need. You feel the gnawing emptiness in your stomach, a familiar ache in these desperate times. Your hand closes around a small, dense chunk of bread you've managed to acquire, its crust cracked, its texture coarse beneath your fingertips. Its sustenance, a simple promise of energy, of temporary relief from the hunger that has become your constant companion. You raise it to your mouth, expecting the familiar, comforting taste of humble grain, the slight yeasty tang that usually defines this staple of life. But, as you tear off a piece and begin to chew, your mouth fills with a different, utterly unwelcome flavor. It's sharp, acrid, undeniably bitter. Not the bitterness of stale flour, but something dry and gritty, a taste that coats your tongue and clings to the roof of your mouth. It's the distinct, unmistakable taste of ash. It feels as if a fine, invisible dust has settled not just on the bread, but deep within its very fibers, infusing every bite with a burnt, smoky essence. You pause, the half-chewed bread suddenly turning to lead in your mouth, your hunger momentarily forgotten, replaced by a profound unease. You look up, and through the perpetual haze that now hangs over the city like a suffocating shroud, you can make out the distant, dark plumes of smoke rising. They are not the cheerful, wispy columns from countless household hearths. These are thick, dark coils, slow and relentless, stretching towards the indifferent sky from beyond the city walls, from makeshift pyres hastily constructed in forgotten fields. The wind, which once carried the sweet scent of the sea, now carries this gritty residue, scattering it indiscriminately over everything, into every nook and cranny. You try another bite, hoping it was an anomaly, but the ash taste persists, even stronger now, metallic, and strangely hollow. It's on your tongue, in your throat, clinging to the very bread you hold. It's the taste of burnt offerings, of things consumed by fire, of what used to be living now reduced to cold gray powder. It's a flavor that tells a story, a chilling, undeniable truth, about the increasing desperation and the escalating toll on human lives. You glance around at the few other figures you see in this deserted square, huddled against walls, gnawing silently on their own meager rations. Their faces are grim, their eyes downcast, and you see the same silent understanding reflected in their hardened expressions. They too are tasting it. They don't need to speak. The shared, bitter flavor is a common language, a universal testament to the grim reality that has consumed their world. This isn't just a taste. It's a constant, visceral reminder that death has so thoroughly permeated the city, so deeply infiltrated the very air, that even the most fundamental act of survival, the simple act of eating, is tainted by the pervasive, physical presence of its grim harvest. You realize that medieval fear was not just the sight of death, but the chilling, undeniable flavor of it, coating your tongue with the ashes of what was, and what might still be. The perpetual, mournful tolling of the bells has become so ingrained in Messina's desolate landscape that you barely register it as sound anymore. It's just part of the heavier air, the constant companion to the pervasive, bitter taste of ash that clings to your tongue. The physical hunger in your stomach is a dull, relentless ache, a constant reminder of scarcity and fear. You find yourself walking towards a small, familiar house, one you've perhaps visited before, a place that once hummed with the simple, reassuring rhythm of daily life. The door, usually latched but welcoming, now hangs slightly ajar, rattling faintly in a stray draft. You push it open, stepping into the dim interior, and are immediately struck by the profound, unnatural chill that permeates the small space. It's not just the temperature of the autumn air, it's the coldness of absence, a stark contrast to the warmth that should emanate from a family hearth. The air itself feels thin, hollow, carrying a faint, stale ghost of a smell. Not the pungent decay of the streets, but something like old, unused cloth, mingled with the lingering, almost imperceptible scent of a meal long past. Your eyes sweep across the main room. A simple wooden table, scoured clean by countless meals, stands in the center. On it, 2 earthenware bowls, mismatched but familiar, sit next to 2 wooden spoons, neatly laid out. They look as though they've been waiting, patiently, for a meal that will never be served. But your gaze falls on the empty space at the table's head, the third, vacant spot where a patriarch or matriarch would preside. The chair is pushed back, almost imperceptibly, as if someone just rose from it, but the dust motes dancing in the meager light tell a different story. The very emptiness of that space is a stark physical presence, a gaping hole where a warm body, a familiar voice, once resided. You reach out, your fingers lightly tracing the worn edge of the wooden table. It's smooth beneath your touch, but cold, utterly cold. You can almost feel the ghostly impressions of countless hands that once gathered here, sharing bread, passing bowls, clasping in laughter or comfort. The hearth in the corner, usually piled with glowing embers or at least warm ash, is now a desolate pit of cold gray stone. No smoke rises, no crackling sounds fill the air. The silence in here is even more profound than outside, a heavy blanket draped over everything, smothering any echo of past joy. A sudden, overwhelming pang hits you, deeper than the physical hunger. It's a profound ache for normalcy, for the comforting weight of bodies gathered around a table, for the clinking of spoons, the murmuring of voices, the simple, undeniable warmth of shared human presence. It's a hunger for yesterday, for the effortless, casual intimacy of a family meal that was once so commonplace it was unremarkable. Now, that everyday scene feels like an unreachable paradise. The physical emptiness of the table, the unused bowls, the silent hearth, it all speaks of a life interrupted, a presence erased. This is the medieval fear that truly cuts to the bone, not just the terror of personal suffering, but the agonizing, persistent ache of seeing the fabric of your community, your family, your very home, unraveled, piece by agonizing piece, leaving behind only the ghost of what was, and an unbearable hunger for a yesterday that will never return. The persistent, desolate rhythm of the bells follows you, a mournful heartbeat beneath the choking ash and perpetual stench of decay that now defines Messina. The city breathes a hollow, shallow breath, its energy drained, replaced by a profound emptiness. You pass by a narrow gap between two crumbling tenement buildings, a space usually filled with a cacophony of small lives, but today it offers only an echoing quiet, a silence so deep it feels like a wound. Then, a sound so faint you almost dismiss it, barely separates itself from the oppressive stillness. A tiny, choked whimper, a dry, reedy catch of breath. It's not a full cry of pain, not a scream of terror, but a soft, almost shy sound of profound distress, fragile as spun glass. It draws you in, pulling you instinctively into the shadowed, refuse-strewn passage. The air here is colder, damper than the main street, smelling of stale waste, damp stone, and something else, something cloying and sickly sweet, reminiscent of spoiled milk mixed with feverish sweat. As you step deeper into the oppressive gloom, your eyes adjust to the low light, and you see it, curled against the rough, cold stone wall, a small, still bundle wrapped in a coarse, faded shawl, barely distinguishable from the surrounding debris. You approach cautiously, your heart thrumming an uneasy rhythm against your ribs, a cold dread starting to spread through your chest. It's a child, impossibly small and frail, no older than 5 or 6. Her eyes are open, wide and unfocused, glazed with a feverish sheen, staring up at the sliver of gray sky visible between the tall, indifferent buildings. Her breath comes in shallow, rapid gasps, each one a tiny, desperate struggle against an unseen weight pressing down on her small chest. You notice the thin, pale skin stretched tautly across her temples, almost translucent, and the way her small hand, no bigger than a bird's claw, occasionally twitches weakly, grasping at nothing but the empty air. And then you see it, a faint, purplish discoloration blooming on her neck just beneath her jaw, a grotesque echo of the buboes you've seen on adults. It's small, barely visible in the dim light, but utterly unmistakable. Your stomach clenches, a wave of nausea washing over you. Beside her, a crude, worn wooden doll lies discarded, its painted smile mocking the grim scene. A small, hard piece of bread, carefully wrapped, rests near her hand, untouched. There's no sign of anyone else, no hurried farewell, no desperate note, just this small, shivering life left utterly alone to face the inevitable. You look around, scanning the shadowed corners, the dark, unseeing windows above, searching for any flicker of movement, any sign of a retreating parent. But there is only emptiness. The thought strikes you, sharp and agonizing, the choice. The unthinkable, gut-wrenching decision that must have been made. To walk away, to leave a child, a piece of your own heart, a living, breathing part of your family, to this solitary, terrifying end. Simply to try and save yourself or others. The silence that descends around the child is not empty. It's thick with the unspoken anguish of that impossible choice, a testament to a love severed by the cruelest necessity. You feel the profound cold seeping from the stone into the child's small frame, the oppressive weight of the disease claiming her breath, and the crushing despair of a parent who, out of an even deeper, more primal terror, had to make the ultimate severance. This is the truth of medieval fear. Not just the horror of contracting the illness, but the moral abyss it forced people into. compelling them to abandon the very bonds of love and family simply to try and preserve their own fragile existence, leaving behind an unbearable testament to fear's ultimate power to corrupt the most fundamental aspects of humanity. The city of Messina now feels like a hollowed-out skull, its only remaining pulse the ceaseless, mournful tolling of bells, a grim counterpoint to the profound silence of the living. The air is a constant, cloying mix of decay and ash, a bitter taste that seems to coat your tongue no matter what you do. The heavy knowledge of abandoned children, of homes reduced to tombs, presses down on your spirit, making each breath feel like a struggle. You find yourself drawn down a narrow, deserted street where the afternoon shadows lengthen quickly, deepening the sense of isolation. Ahead, through a slightly ajar wooden door, a faint glow of a dying fire flickers. The door isn't boarded up, not yet, but it hangs precariously, as if unsure whether to close fully or swing open in surrender. A low, continuous moaning, barely audible, emanates from within, a sound of deep, sustained suffering that pulls you closer. You peer through the narrow gap. The small, familiar room inside is sparsely lit. On a simple cot, an old woman lies curled, her body racked by tremors, her face flushed with fever, glistening with sweat. Her breathing is shallow, ragged, and you can clearly see the unmistakable, dark swellings, the buboes, pushing through the thin fabric of her nightgown, angry and distended. She reaches out a trembling hand, weak and uncoordinated, towards the edge of the cot, a desperate, almost instinctive plea for comfort. Across the room, perhaps only a few feet away, stands a man, likely her son, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of profound agony. His eyes are fixed on her outstretched hand, on her suffering, a visible battle raging within him. You can see the love, the deep, familial connection that urges him forward, the lifetime of shared warmth and affection that screams for him to bridge that small distance, to take her hand, to offer a final, comforting touch. His body aches to move, to provide solace, to ignore the terrible, terrifying reality. But he doesn't move. His feet remain rooted to the spot, as if nailed to the cold earth floor. His hands are clenched tightly at his sides, knuckles white, his nails digging into his palms. His gaze, though filled with anguish, also holds a flicker of raw, primal fear. The fear of the unseen enemy that now makes even the simplest act of human contact a potential death sentence. You can almost feel the phantom barrier between them, an invisible wall of dread, separating blood from blood, love from touch. He coughs once, a dry, nervous sound, and quickly covers his mouth with his arm, his eyes darting towards his own flesh. A quick, terrified self-assessment. The old woman's hand trembles for a moment longer, then drops back onto the cot, the effort too great, the lack of response too devastating. A silent tear rolls down the man's cheek, not a sob, but a single, heavy drop of grief, a testament to the unbearable choice he is forced to make. The bond of kinship, a tie meant to be unbreakable, is now strained to its absolute breaking point, not by malice, but by the overwhelming, insidious power of a disease that weaponizes affection. This is the ultimate medieval fear. Not just the physical pain or the certainty of death, but the horrific, gut-wrenching realization that the very act of loving, of touching, of comforting a dying parent or child has become an act of self-destruction, tearing apart the deepest, most sacred bonds of humanity, leaving behind only the chilling, empty space where a touch of love should have been. The desolate rhythm of Messina's bells continues to thrum beneath the profound silence, a bitter taste of ash clinging to your tongue, a constant reminder of the city's grim reality. The pervasive scent of decay is now so ingrained it's almost a part of the air you breathe. You've become accustomed to the quiet terror, the fear of the unseen enemy. But today, a different sound rips through this grim stillness. A raw, guttural rumble that grows rapidly into a chaotic roar, vibrating through the cobblestones under your feet. It's a human sound, yes, but stripped of reason, filled with a primal, desperate energy that chills you to the bone. You instinctively quicken your pace, drawn by a morbid curiosity towards the heart of the commotion. As you turn into the main square, the sight hits you with the force of a physical blow. A mob has gathered, a churning, heaving mass of desperate faces, contorted by a mixture of grief, terror, and incandescent rage. They are common folk, laborers, merchants, women clutching their shawls, all united by a terrifying singular fury. Their cries are not for help or for salvation, but for vengeance, poisoner, witch, destroyer of wells. The words are indistinct in the collective roar, a cacophony of fear and blame, but the underlying sentiment is clear, a terrifying consensus of misplaced anger. Your eyes are immediately drawn to the center of the surging crowd. There, a man, gaunt and disheveled, his clothes torn, is being dragged mercilessly across the square. His hair is matted, his face bruised and streaked with dirt and blood. His eyes, wide with sheer terror, dart frantically, searching for an escape that simply isn't there. He doesn't look like an enemy. He looks like another victim, overwhelmed, weakened, and now utterly alone. But in the eyes of the mob, he is the visible, tangible embodiment of their suffering, a convenient target for their unbearable grief. The air around you crackles with their raw, animalistic energy. You feel the surge of the crowd, the press of desperate bodies, the chilling collective madness, the smell of unwashed bodies, of stale sweat, and the pungent metallic tang of blood mixes with the omnipresent decay, creating a horrifying new aroma of human desperation. You feel a prickling on your skin, a shiver that has nothing to do with the cold air, but with the chilling realization of how quickly fear can twist people into something monstrous, how easily they can turn on one another when faced with an incomprehensible enemy. And then it happens. As the man is thrown violently against a stone fountain, a piercing, agonizing scream tears through the frenzied roar of the crowd. It's not a shriek of defiance, but a raw, unfiltered cry of pure pain and terror, a sound that rips at your very soul, an echo of ultimate helplessness. It's human, yes, but so utterly stripped of dignity, so devoid of hope, that it feels less like a sound and more like a wound opening in the fabric of the world. The mob pauses for a single, breath-holding moment, then surges forward again, their roar revitalized, fueled by the very sound of their victim's agony. You realize this isn't about medicine, or masks, or even the plague itself. This is the medieval terror in its most brutal form. The human desperation to blame, to punish, to find a visible enemy when faced with an invisible one, twisting communal fear into a devastating, inescapable tide of violence that consumes the innocent, leaving only the chilling, unforgettable echo of a scapegoat's final, desperate scream. The ceaseless, mournful tolling of Messina's bells now merges with the oppressive silence of the living, a grim, persistent thrum beneath the ever-present stench of decay and the lingering, bitter taste of ash. The memory of the mob's roar, of raw human violence, still echoes in your ears, but now a different kind of anguish permeates the air, a spiritual one. You find yourself drawn towards the tallest structure in the city, the great cathedral, its formidable stone facade, usually a symbol of unwavering faith, now looming darkly against a bruised sky. You push open one of the massive wooden doors, its ancient hinges groaning like a dying breath, and step into the vast, cavernous interior. The air inside is cold and heavy, thick with the faint, metallic scent of old incense, mingled with the earthy smell of damp stone and something else. A pervasive, almost palpable scent of desperate hope and profound despair. The grand nave, usually bustling with petitioners and devout worshippers, is eerily sparse. A few scattered figures kneel rigidly on the cold stone floor, their bodies stiff with an intensity that borders on agony. Your eyes sweep across the familiar stained glass windows, once vibrant with stories of saints and divine miracles, now casting muted, watery light onto the dusty floor. They seem to tell a different tale today, a distant, almost mocking memory of hope. Before the massive altar, bathed in the dim light of flickering tapers, a priest stands. His back to you, his voice a strained, reedy drone as he leads a prayer. His words, Latin and ancient, usually comforting, now feel hollow, echoing unnaturally in the vast emptiness, swallowed by the silence. You observe the kneeling figures. One old woman, her face a road map of grief, clutches a crucifix so tightly her knuckles are white, her head bowed low, her entire body trembling. Her lips move in a frantic, ceaseless whisper, a litany of pleas. Yet another man, younger, perhaps a tradesman, kneels stiffly, his head thrown back, his eyes open and fixed on the vaulted ceiling. There is no supplication in his gaze, only a profound, bewildered emptiness, a desperate question hanging unspoken in the air. His hands aren't clasped in prayer. They rest, limp and open, at his sides, as if he's waiting for something, anything, a sign, a reason, a response that simply isn't coming. You feel the cold seeping up through your boots from the ancient stone floor, a chill that seems to penetrate directly to your bones. The weight of unanswered prayers, of broken promises, of a divine presence that feels utterly distant, presses down on you. The air in here is not blessed. It's heavy with the collective struggle of souls grappling with an inexplicable, indiscriminate suffering. Why, in a city so devout, filled with people who lived by God's word, would such an unspeakable horror be visited upon them? Where is the promised salvation, the divine protection, when death claims the righteous and the sinner alike, with no discernible pattern, no apparent justice? You find yourself staring at the large, carved crucifix above the altar, at the image of suffering and sacrifice. But today it doesn't offer solace. Instead, it seems to mock, a silent, stony testament to a pain that feels abandoned, left to fester. This is the ultimate medieval fear, not just the terror of the physical plague, but the agonizing crisis of faith it ignited. The torment of wrestling with a God who promised deliverance and eternal grace, yet delivered instead a relentless, incomprehensible suffering, forcing every soul to confront the chilling possibility that they were utterly alone, abandoned in the face of an apocalypse, with only their own despair echoing in the empty halls of what was once a bastion of hope. The monotonous tolling of Messina's bells, though ceaseless, now seems to recede into the background, a dull ache beneath the more immediate, unsettling shift in the city's atmosphere. The pervasive stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash cling to you, familiar, grim companions. You move through streets that are even emptier now, a terrifying quiet having fully settled. But then, a new sound begins to assert itself, cutting through the morbid stillness. It starts as a low rumble, distant at first, a deep vibration that you feel more than hear, humming subtly through the worn cobblestones beneath your feet. It's a rhythmic, insistent thrum, growing steadily louder, announcing a frantic movement, a purposeful departure. It's the sound of heavy carriage wheels, iron-shod, grinding and clattering over the rough pavement, pulling away from the city's heart and towards its outer gates. This isn't the lumbering pace of a merchant's cart. This is a rapid, urgent retreat. You turn your head, drawn by the increasing volume, and watch as a procession begins to emerge from a grander thoroughfare. Gleaming, finely lacquered carriages, pulled by well-fed straining horses, surge past. The plumes on the horses, heads bob frantically, their hooves strike sparks from the stones, and the ornate doors of the carriages are shut tight, their windows discreetly curtained. You catch glimpses of rich fabrics, of anxious, pale faces through momentary gaps, men and women in their finest clothes, their eyes wide with a desperate resolve. Servants, equally terrified, ride on the rear, clutching bundles, their expressions mirroring the urgency of their masters. There's no pause, no lingering glance back, only a relentless, headlong flight. The air thickens with the acrid smell of horse sweat, of churned-up dust, and the fleeting, expensive scent of perfumes and pomanders that briefly cuts through the ubiquitous odor of decay. It's a stark, almost obscene contrast. You stand on the side of the street amidst the few remaining figures. A stooped beggar, a woman clutching a thin child, a disabled veteran leaning against a wall. All of you rooted, unmoving, as this parade of wealth and desperate privilege rushes by. Their faces are gaunt, their eyes hollow, not with pity, but with a profound, bitter resignation. One carriage, perhaps more opulent than the others, momentarily snags on a loose stone, its wheels screeching in protest. For a split second, a crack opens in the curtained window, and a pair of fear-filled eyes meets yours. There is no recognition, no shared humanity, just a raw animal terror that sees you, a stationary figure, as merely another part of the horrifying landscape being fled. Then, with a frantic crack of the whip, the carriage lurches free, accelerating, disappearing quickly into the haze towards the countryside, towards a perceived safety that is denied to you. The rumble fades, leaving behind only a trail of dust and a heavier silence, a more profound stillness. You feel the grit of the dust on your tongue, on your skin, a physical reminder of the passage. The medieval fear that truly grips you now isn't just of the disease, or even of death itself. It's the chilling, undeniable understanding of the deep chasm that divides humanity in the face of absolute terror. It's the realization that while some can buy themselves the fleeting illusion of escape, the vast majority are simply left behind, stranded in a dying city, abandoned to a fate dictated not by their deeds, but by their lack of gold. The rumble of those fleeing carriages is the sound of society tearing itself apart, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding truth of who is truly disposable. You leave the grim, decaying streets of Messina behind, the mournful bells fading into a dull thrum as you push out beyond the city gates. The rumble of the fleeing carriages is long gone, their dust settled, leaving you in a countryside that initially feels like a breath of fresh air after the city's suffocating embrace. Here, the scent of damp earth and distant pine needles temporarily overrides the pervasive stench of ash and decay. You can hear the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant bleating of sheep, sounds that should be comforting, peaceful. But then, as you approach a grand, imposing fortress, perched on a hill overlooking the now silent land, a different kind of quiet descends. These are the walls built for safety, for defense against external threats, thick and unyielding. The enormous oak gates, studded with iron, stand shut with an air of absolute finality, a formidable barrier between worlds. A single small wicket gate is grudgingly opened, allowing you passage through an archway that feels like swallowing you whole. Inside, the chill is immediate, a deep, pervasive cold that seems to emanate from the very stones themselves. The grand courtyard, usually bustling with stable hands, guards, and servants, is unnervingly empty. Your footsteps echo loudly on the ancient cobbles, each sound bouncing off the towering walls, a stark intrusion into a silence that feels too heavy, too profound. There's no comforting smell of cooking, no clang of a blacksmith, no casual chatter, just the scent of aged stone, beeswax, and a faint, indefinable mustiness. You pass through an arched doorway into the great hall. It's magnificent, with towering ceilings, rich tapestries depicting hunting scenes, and a vast fireplace where only a few smoldering logs offer a meager, almost theatrical warmth. Yet it feels entirely devoid of life. The polished surfaces of the heavy oak tables gleam, reflecting the dim light, but there are no platters of food, no overflowing goblets, no gathering of noble lords and ladies. The very air seems to have forgotten how to carry laughter or conversation. You see a figure, a woman in rich velvet, sitting alone at the head of the impossibly long table, her back rigidly straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her gaze is fixed not on you, not on anything in the room, but straight ahead, into the middle distance, as if watching a play unfolding only in her mind. Her eyes are wide, unblinking, betraying a profound, unsettling stillness. She doesn't flinch as you approach, doesn't acknowledge your presence. Her isolation, a conscious choice to escape the plague, has become an almost physical weight around her. You notice a single, perfectly ripe apple on a silver tray near her, untouched, a vibrant splash of color in the desaturated grandeur. It's a testament to the fact that here, within these walls, there is no scarcity of food, no threat of immediate physical contagion. Yet, the air is thick with a different kind of malady. You feel the profound quiet pressing in, the terrible absence of human connection, the insidious creep of solitude into every grand, empty chamber. It's a silence that isn't peaceful. It's the maddening quiet of a mind turning inward, consuming itself. This is the ultimate medieval fear for those with means. Not the crowded, plague-ridden streets, but the terrible irony of their escape. You realize that a castle, designed for ultimate protection, can become the most profound of prisons. Here, in this fortress of privilege, the unseen enemy isn't the physical plague carried on the air, but the slow, chilling decay of the human spirit, starved of connection, twisting the mind into a madness born of extreme isolation. The true fear is discovering that even when you escape death, you might still lose yourself, locked away in a gilded cage, watching the world die from behind impregnable walls, utterly alone. The ceaseless, mournful tolling of Messina's bells has become a hollow hum, a backdrop to a city suffocating under the pervasive stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash. The terror of the unseen plague has morphed, twisting reason, turning fear into desperation. You find yourself pushing through a small, huddled cluster of onlookers near the city's largest piazza, the air thick with the usual grim odors, but now also carrying a sharper, more metallic tang, an almost electrical tension. And then you hear it. A sharp, wet crack, undeniably brutal, like a heavy piece of leather striking damp flesh. It's followed by a collective, almost involuntary gasp from the small crowd. A ripple of discomfort, quickly swallowed by a low, guttural chant that rises from the heart of the square. Another crack, then another, rhythmic and insistent, each one cutting through the heavy air with a sickening finality. It's the sound of the flagellants. You press forward, a morbid curiosity overriding your unease. The sight that confronts you is stark, horrifying in its raw vulnerability. A procession of men, perhaps 20 or 30, moves slowly across the piazza. They are stripped to the waist, their bare torsos exposed to the chill autumn air. Their heads are bowed, almost shaved, and a heavy wooden crucifix is clutched in each man's left hand. In their right, they grip crude whips, made of several leather thongs, often knotted, sometimes with sharp pieces of metal or glass woven into the ends. As they shuffle forward, their bare feet slapping softly on the cold cobblestones, their bodies sway in unison. Then, with a collective, agonizing grunt, each man raises his whip high, drawing it back, and brings it down with full force across his own shoulders. The sharp crack echoes again, followed by a softer, more gruesome sound. The wet slap of leather on skin, the ripping sensation that seems to tear the air itself. You see their backs, a grotesque canvas of crisscrossing welts, already inflamed, some openly bleeding, the dark red streaks contrasting brutally with their pale flesh. A new, sickeningly sweet smell now dominates, the coppery tang of fresh blood mingling with the sweat and fear. They continue their slow, agonizing march, their chants growing louder, more fervent, a desperate plea for divine mercy, an attempt to appease a wrathful God through self-inflicted pain. Their faces are a mixture of ecstasy and agony, eyes squeezed shut, jaws clenched, sweat and tears mingling with the blood that now drips down their bodies. The onlookers, a handful of terrified, desperate souls, watch with a mixture of reverence, horror, and a chilling, nascent hope. They believe this public suffering might work, might turn the tide, might somehow cleanse the city of its unseen enemy. You see a woman cross herself frantically, her lips moving in silent prayer, her eyes fixed on the bleeding backs, a desperate hunger for salvation in her gaze. You stand there, a helpless witness to this raw, visceral display of faith and fear. The sharp, wet sound of leather on flesh pounds against your eardrums, each crack a physical blow. You realize that this isn't just a spectacle, it's a terrifying testament to human desperation. When reason fails, when prayer feels unanswered, when the bonds of community fray, people will turn to the most extreme measures, to public suffering, to self-punishment, hoping to find control where there is none. This is the true medieval fear, laid bare, the terrifying lengths to which humanity will go, not just to survive, but to understand, to appease, to somehow control an incomprehensible, merciless enemy, even if it means tearing their own flesh apart in a public, agonizing plea to the heavens. The ceaseless, mournful tolling of Messina's bells now merges into a dull background thrum, beneath the bitter taste of ash and the pervasive stench of decay. The raw, guttural cries of the mob from earlier have faded, replaced by a different kind of sound, a rhythmic, sickening thud that has settled into the piazza. You stand near the edge of the small crowd, still reeling from the visceral display of self-flagellation, but now you find your perception shifting, moving beyond mere horror. You focus on one of the flagellants, a man whose back is already a canvas of crimson welts. As he raises his arm, the heavy, knotted leather whip arcs through the air, carrying with it a faint, metallic scent that hints at embedded barbs. You anticipate the impact, your own body tensing in a sympathetic flinch. Then, the sharp, wet crack echoes, cutting through the low, desperate chanting of the procession. You don't just hear it, you feel it. A phantom sting across your own shoulders, A quick, burning sensation that instantly gives way to a dull, throbbing ache. But then, as he recovers, preparing for the next strike, you catch a glimpse of his face. It's contorted, yes, etched with agonizing pain, sweat and blood mingling on his grimy cheeks. Yet, behind the agony, something else flickers in his eyes. A strange, almost feverish intensity, a desperate rapture. His gaze is not vacant with suffering, but oddly focused, distant, as if he's communing with something far beyond the physical world, something that transcends the brutal present. He breathes heavily, a ragged gasp that seems to pull air not just into his lungs but into his very soul. As the whip comes down again, and again, a new sensation takes hold. The initial sharp pain, though undeniable, is quickly subsumed by a deeper, more profound ache, a dull, spreading warmth that radiates across his back. It's a sensation of purification, you realize, an imagined cleansing. Each blow isn't just pain, it's an offering, a sacrifice. You see his lips move, no longer just chanting, but perhaps forming a silent prayer, a desperate plea for forgiveness, for divine intervention. He seems to be reaching for something, through the pain, towards a transcendent moment where earthly suffering might finally connect him to a higher power, making him worthy, making him clean. The air around the flagellants is thick, not just with the smell of blood and sweat, but also with an almost palpable energy of fervent belief, of collective yearning. The scattered onlookers in the crowd, their faces gaunt with famine and fear, watch with a desperate reverence. They aren't just observing, they are participating, their silent prayers riding on the sharp cracks of the whips, their hopes invested in this raw display of self-punishment. They, too, believe that this intense, self-inflicted agony is a language God might finally understand, a dramatic gesture that could avert his terrible wrath, bringing an end to the incomprehensible suffering. You see their eyes, not just in horror but in a profound yearning, a fragile, desperate hope that this pain, this ultimate sacrifice, might somehow be enough. You realize this is a core of medieval fear, not just the physical terror of the plague, but the existential dread of divine judgment. It's the terrifying conviction that human sin is the cause of their suffering, and that only through extreme penance, through this visceral, public performance of agony, can they hope to appease an angry God and buy back their salvation. The ecstasy of their pain, however grotesque, is a desperate gamble, a profound leap of faith into the unknown, a final, agonizing attempt to regain control over an utterly chaotic world by sacrificing their own flesh, believing that through self-inflicted torment, they might finally escape the ultimate, invisible torment of a wrathful God. The mournful, ceaseless tolling of Messina's bells has become a distant, almost forgotten hum, swallowed by a heavier, more immediate reality. The pervasive stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash still cling to you, but now a new sensory experience dominates, overriding all else. The raw, exhausting physicality of desperate labor. You stand in a desolate, overgrown field just beyond the city walls, where the wind whips past your ears, carrying not solace, but the sharpened tang of disturbed earth, mixed with the sickly sweet, unmistakable smell of too many unburied dead. Your hands ache, muscles screaming with fatigue, protesting every movement, but you don't stop. Your fingers, raw and chafed, dig into the stubborn, unyielding ground. Each scoop of earth, whether pulled by a makeshift spade, fashioned from a broken plank, or simply clawed away with bare hands, brings a fresh, gritty wave of soil beneath your fingernails. It's coarse, damp, and cold, clinging to your skin, embedding itself deep within every crack and crevice. You feel the sharp edges of pebbles, the tearing resistance of roots, the chilling dampness that seeps into your bones, even through the sweat that stings your eyes. The very texture of the soil is a grim testament to the grimness of your task. You wipe sweat from your brow with the back of a grimy hand, feeling the damp grit smear across your skin, a grim, unwelcome mark of your labor. The sun, a pale, indifferent disk in the hazy sky, offers no warmth, only a weak illumination to this desolate scene. Nearby, wrapped in a simple, hastily torn linen sheet, lies a small, tragically still form. It's too small, too quiet, too familiar, to be anything but a piece of your own heart. There are no other mourners here, no priest to offer last rites, no solemn procession, just you, the biting wind, and the relentless, demanding earth. The smell is overwhelming, cloying and sweet, radiating from the shroud-wrapped body, seeping from the newly turned soil. It's the smell of life departed, of the inevitable decay that follows. Now so close, so intimate, it feels as though it's already clinging to your own skin. You glance around. In the distance, other figures, hunched and silent, are engaged in similar solitary acts of desperate grief, their movements slow and heavy, like ghosts performing an endless ritual. Each solitary figure is digging their own hole in the ground, for their own lost loved one, their isolation absolute, their sorrow unshared. As you finally manage to scrape out a shallow, insufficient trench, barely deep enough, your fingers brush against a sharp piece of stone embedded in the earth, causing a fresh prick of pain. You ignore it. The gritty soil now coats your palms, your forearms, even your teeth, a persistent physical reminder of the brutal reality. This isn't just digging a grave. It's tearing a raw, jagged hole in your world, one handful of dirt at a time. You realize that medieval fear was not just the terror of seeing death, but the profound, heartbreaking agony of being forced to participate in its grim work, stripping away all dignity, all ceremony, leaving only the raw, physical labor of burying your own, alone in a desolate field, feeling the cold, gritty earth beneath your fingernails, a chilling, inescapable mark of loss that time can never truly wash away. The physical ache of digging your own grave for a loved one is still raw in your muscles. The gritty soil beneath your fingernails a persistent, brutal reminder. The ceaseless, mournful bells of Messina now barely register, their sorrow drowned out by the sheer, overwhelming scale of death that grips the city. The air is thick, almost opaque, with the cloying stench of decay, a bitter metallic taste coating your tongue. You stand on the edge of a vast, gaping pit, a chilling testament to a horror far beyond individual grief. This isn't a single, carefully dug grave. This is a chasm, an enormous raw tear in the earth, stretching further than you can easily see, its sides uneven, hastily excavated. You feel the cold, damp earth beneath your feet, vibrating faintly from the ceaseless activity of desperate men. The air here is a suffocating blanket of putrefaction so powerful it makes your stomach churn, forcing you to breathe in shallow, desperate gulps. It's the stench of too many bodies, too quickly gathered, too crudely managed. Figures, gaunt and grim, move with a macabre efficiency around the pit's edge. They are not priests or professional gravediggers, but ordinary men, pressed into this horrific service, their faces obscured by rags tied loosely over their mouths and noses, their eyes wide and haunted. Their movements are devoid of ceremony, stripped bare of human dignity. They haul bodies, wrapped in tattered shrouds or simply in their everyday clothes, some barely recognizable as human forms, their limbs askew. You watch as a body, an elderly man perhaps, is hoisted by two figures using ropes, then unceremoniously tipped over the edge. There's a sickening thud, a wet impact, as it lands in the depths below. You feel the jolt of impact reverberate through the ground, a chilling echo. Your eyes follow its descent, seeing it land amidst a tangled, horrifying mass of other bodies, piled one upon another, limb intertwined with limb, faces obscured by dirt and the decaying flesh of strangers. There is no individual resting place, no marked stone, no personal farewell, just a terrifying anonymous heap. The sight sears itself into your mind. You imagine the man, once a living, breathing soul with a name, a family, a history, now just another indistinguishable form in this grotesque tangle. His identity, his essence, is instantly dissolved, swallowed by the collective horror, becoming just another piece of the anonymous dead. His existence, his memories, his unique story is obliterated, not just by death, but by the manner of his burial, lost forever in the embrace of this vast, indifferent pit. You stand there, a helpless witness to this systematic erasure of humanity, this brutal stripping away of individual worth. The cold, damp air, thick with the stench of death, presses down on you, a physical weight. You feel the profound injustice, the terrible indignity of it all. This is the deepest medieval fear. Not merely the loss of life, but the complete and utter loss of self, of identity, swallowed by an indiscriminate, overwhelming calamity. It's the terror of becoming just another nameless statistic, another anonymous body in a pit of strangers, your existence forgotten, your individual story erased by the sheer brutal magnitude of the plague, transforming the sanctity of death into a horrifying, communal obliteration. The cold, heavy air of Messina presses in on you, thick with the enduring stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash. The bells toll ceaselessly, their mournful rhythm now a mere whisper beneath the profound, spiritual dread that has settled over the city. You find yourself drawn into a small, dark room, its air stifling and close, carrying the distinct, coppery smell of sickness and old sweat, along with a faint, cloying sweetness that hints at inevitable finality. On a crude, straw mattress, a man lies twisted, his body racked by a violent fever. His breathing is a harsh, rasping sound, a shallow, desperate struggle for air that fills the tiny space. His skin is slick with cold sweat, clammy to the touch, and his eyes, though clouded with pain, dart frantically around the dim room, wide with a terror that transcends the physical. You see the prominent, angry swellings on his neck and groin, dark and throbbing, visible proof of the unseen enemy ravaging his body. Yet, his fear is not purely for the pain or even for the coming death. It's for something far deeper, far more terrifying in this medieval world. His trembling hand reaches out, not for comfort, but for the rough wooden crucifix clutched tightly by his wife, who kneels beside him. Her face is pale and tear-streaked, her lips moving in a frantic, whispered prayer, her own terror mirroring his. He tries to speak, but only a dry, rattling cough escapes, a desperate, gargling sound that scrapes in his throat. His gaze pleads, a silent, agonizing question. He needs absolution. He needs the last rites. He needs a priest to cleanse his soul, to prepare him for the journey, to ensure his passage not to eternal damnation but to the mercy of God. But no priest is coming. The church doors in Messina are all but closed, the clergy either dead, dying, or fled, paralyzed by the same terror that grips everyone else. The holy oil, the blessed words, the final forgiveness, they are denied to him. You can almost feel the profound spiritual void in the room, the terrifying absence of the sacred ritual that, for centuries, had offered solace and promise in the face of death. The man's eyes, though fading, fill with a new, horrifying realization. He is dying, not just physically, but spiritually alone, unforgiven, unabsolved. His gasping breaths grow shallower, faster, as if he is trying to outrun a spiritual fate far worse than any earthly suffering. His wife, sensing his agony, presses the crucifix to his lips, whispering desperately, "God forgive you, my love. God forgive you." But her voice is weak, her words unordained, offering no true spiritual comfort in his final, terrifying moments. She cannot offer what he truly craves, what his soul desperately needs. You feel the crushing weight of that denial, the unbearable agony of a soul facing judgment without the promised intercession. This is the medieval fear that truly broke people. Not just the loss of life, but the terrifying, undeniable threat of eternal damnation, a hell far worse than any earthly plague, brought about not by sin alone, but by the cruel, inescapable fact that in the face of widespread death, even God's earthly representatives had abandoned their flock, leaving countless souls to face an unknown, terrifying eternity, utterly alone and unforgiven. The cold, heavy air of Messina still presses in on you, thick with the enduring stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash. The bells toll ceaselessly, their mournful rhythm now a mere background hum, overshadowed by the spiritual dread that has settled over the city. You find yourself once again in the vast, echoing interior of the great cathedral. But this time, the silence feels less about abandonment and more about the deafening absence of divine response. You walk slowly down the nave, your footsteps echoing unnaturally on the cold stone floor, the sound swallowed by the cavernous space. The dim, watery light filtering through the stained glass windows illuminates dust motes dancing in the stale air, making the emptiness even more pronounced. The faint, metallic scent of old incense, usually a comforting aroma of sanctity, now feels cold, almost mocking, a ghost of prayers long unanswered. Your gaze falls upon the ornate holy water font near the entrance. It is completely dry, a basin of polished stone, but utterly empty. No shimmering surface to dip your fingers into, no cool, refreshing drops to bless your brow. It stands there, a beautiful, hollow testament to a protection that is simply no longer available, a ritual rendered meaningless by its absence. You feel an inexplicable chill, not from the temperature, but from the stark symbolic void. This vessel of purification, once a first line of defense against the unseen, is now as barren as the hope in many hearts. Further along, in a side chapel, a small, glass-encased reliquary sits on a velvet cushion. Inside, a fragment of bone, perhaps from a saint, or a sliver of wood from a holy cross, is displayed. It's a sacred relic, a powerful connection to the divine, venerated for its miraculous properties, its promise of healing and intercession. You reach out, your fingers hovering over the cool, smooth glass, imagining the countless hands that have touched this very spot, seeking solace, begging for miracles. But as you look closer, your eyes sweeping over the dusty, neglected display, you see no evidence of recent visitors, no desperate prayers etched into the air around it. The relic sits, inert and silent, its supposed power seemingly defunct, its promise utterly broken. You feel a profound, chilling sense of disillusionment begin to creep into your spirit. The grand promises of salvation, the tangible symbols of divine protection that once anchored this world, now stand exposed as impotent, hollow. You see a lone elderly woman kneeling before a small altar, her body a rigid silhouette against the flickering candlelight. Her head is bowed, her lips moving in a frantic, ceaseless whisper, but her hands, gnarled with age, are not clasped in hopeful prayer. Instead, they are pressed against her temples, as if trying to hold her head together, as if the very act of faith is now a source of agony, a question she can no longer bear to ask. The coldness seeps deeper into your bones, a spiritual chill that overrides any physical discomfort. You realize that this isn't just about the absence of a priest or the failure of a healing potion. This is about the collapse of an entire cosmic order, the terrifying understanding that the very foundations of medieval faith, the efficacy of sacred objects, the power of intercession, the protective hand of a benevolent God, have been violently shaken, revealing a universe that feels indifferent, if not actively hostile. The Church, once a fortress against spiritual despair, now stands as a monument to its own empty promises, leaving you and everyone else to face the inevitable, utterly unshielded, and profoundly alone in a world where even God's grace feels like a bitter, distant memory. The cold, heavy air of Messina still presses in on you, thick with the enduring stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash. The incessant, mournful tolling of bells has faded to a distant echo, a mere hum, beneath the profound, crushing silence of the city. You walk, not through bustling thoroughfares, but through deserted alleys, your own footsteps unnervingly loud. You find yourself drawn, almost against your will, to a familiar doorway, once vibrant with life, now a dark, uninviting maw. This is your home, or what remains of it. You push the heavy wooden door inward, and it groans on its hinges, a sound like a weary sigh. The air inside is instantly different from the stale, outdoor chill. Here, it's a penetrating, bone-deep cold, an oppressive absence of warmth that makes the hairs on your arms stand on end. You step into the main room, and the first thing you feel is a distinct icy draft, snaking across the stone floor, wrapping around your ankles, creeping upwards. It's a cold that feels wrong, unnatural, far deeper than any winter chill. Your eyes sweep across the space. The hearth, usually a glowing heart of embers, is utterly black, cold to the touch. The wooden benches, once crowded with bodies, are stark and empty. You can almost see the ghosts of warmth, the shimmering heat that should have radiated from a dozen bodies. Fathers, mothers, siblings, children, gathered here, laughing, talking, simply being. But now there's just this cavernous void. The air stirs faintly, the cold draft seeming to whisper through the empty spaces where human warmth used to be. It carries with it not the scent of hearth smoke or cooking food, but a faint, lingering ghost of old, sick sheets, a memory of last breaths. You reach out, your fingers tracing the smooth, worn surface of the dining table. It's cold, lifeless, reflecting the dim light from the window like a dark mirror. Your memory flashes back. A dozen hands, bustling, reaching, sharing, clinking earthenware against wood. Now, that memory is a raw ache, and the table's surface feels impossibly vast, its emptiness stretching out before you. The chairs, pushed back from the table, stand like silent sentinels, each one a stark monument to a missing presence, a specific weight and warmth that will never return. The cold draft seems to intensify, blowing not from a cracked window or a loose door, but from the very absence of life that once filled these walls. It settles on your skin, prickling your flesh, a chilling reminder of who is gone and who remains. You are here. You are standing in a room that was once a vibrant microcosm of life, a hub of human connection, now reduced to an echoing shell, preserved in this unbearable, profound cold. You feel a profound, aching emptiness in your chest, a weight that has nothing to do with hunger or fatigue. It's the unbearable lightness of being the only one left, a gnawing question that echoes in the cold, hollow space. Why you? Why here in this silence, in this pervasive chill that seems to seep not just from the stones, but from the very fabric of your survival? This is the medieval fear that cuts deeper than any plague doctor's mask. The chilling, isolating burden of survivor's guilt. The profound, unshakable terror of standing alone in a room that was once your entire world, now hollowed out, perpetually cold, a constant physical reminder of all that was lost, and the inexplicable, terrible grace of being the only one left to remember it. The ceaseless, mournful tolling of Messina's bells has finally faded, not into silence, but into a different kind of quiet. A profound, pervasive hush now blankets the city, a sound in itself, pressing in on your ears, making them strain for any echo of the past. The pervasive stench of decay has lessened, softened, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of neglect, of ancient stones slowly returning to its wilder state, mingled with the faint, unsettling sweetness of dried leaves disturbed by the wind. The bitter taste of ash, however, still lingers stubbornly on your tongue, a phantom memory, a constant reminder. You walk through the main piazza, once a roaring heart of commerce and vibrant life, now an expanse of unnerving emptiness. The market stalls stand abandoned, their wooden frames skeletal and exposed, some toppled to reveal patches of bare earth where goods once spilled. Others are draped with tattered, sun-bleached cloths that flap like desperate flags in the breeze, mournful reminders of vanished trade. No vendors hawk their wares, no children chase pigeons, no merchants haggle over prices. The cobblestones, once worn smooth and shiny by countless bustling feet, are now growing tenacious tufts of persistent weeds in their cracks, asserting a quiet dominion over human paths, a testament to the reclaiming power of the earth. The very air, once thick with human sound and scent, feels strangely thin, stretched, as if it's forgotten how to carry the weight of vibrant communal life. You reach out, your fingers tracing the rough, splintered edge of an abandoned stall, feeling the cold, raw wood, the fine layer of dust that coats everything, blurring the sharp lines of human endeavor. It's not just stillness, it's a profound absence, a palpable vacuum where life once teemed. Buildings that were once bustling homes now stand with gaping, empty windows like unseeing eyes, their heavy wooden doors hanging slightly ajar, revealing interiors shrouded in perpetual twilight and a silence that seems to absorb all sound. A stray dog, gaunt and wary, slinks past in the distance, a solitary shadow in this remade landscape, its presence only amplifying the crushing emptiness. A creature moving through a world that no longer seems to need it. You pause again, listening intently. What you hear now is the rustle of dry leaves skittering across the forgotten square, the whisper of the wind sighing through desolate arches, the distant, mournful cry of a lone seabird from the deserted harbor. These are the sounds of a world slowly returning to a more primal state, devoid of human clamor, irrevocably reshaped by an unimaginable catastrophe. The familiar landmarks are still there. The old well, the majestic cathedral spire, the formidable city walls, but they stand as hollowed-out monuments to a past that no longer exists, their purpose fundamentally altered by the profound emptiness they now oversee. You realize with a chilling clarity that settles deep in your bones that this is the aftermath. This is the world that survived, and that you survived into. It's a world remade, fundamentally altered, rendered unrecognizable not by dramatic destruction, but by an pervasive, unsettling absence. This is the true medieval fear that transcends the immediate horror of death, the terrifying burden of inheriting a world stripped bare of its humanity, its familiar rhythms silenced, its future an unwritten, terrifying blank page. It's the profound, unsettling quiet of being left alive, alone, in a world that has forgotten how to be itself, leaving you to piece together existence amidst the ruins of what once was. The unsettling quiet of Messina still holds you, a profound, pervasive hush that makes you strain your ears for any familiar sound. The stench of decay has softened, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of neglect, of stone and ancient soil, but the bitter taste of ash still clings stubbornly to your tongue, a phantom memory. You've witnessed the failures of official healers, the abandonment of faith, the brutality born of fear. Now a different kind of desperation leads you down a winding, forgotten path, away from the city's grand thoroughfares, towards the edges of accepted knowledge. You find yourself before a small, unassuming cottage, almost hidden by a tangle of wild vines and overgrown bushes. It's a place that whispers of secrets, of things deliberately kept out of sight. As you approach, a new scent reaches you, strong and distinct, cutting through the prevailing damp earthiness. It's a powerful, pungent blend of herbs. The sharp, clean bite of mint, the woody, camphoraceous aroma of sage, the slightly sickly sweetness of unidentifiable crushed leaves, all mingling with the underlying earthy smell of rich, dark soil, as if the very ground here holds ancient remedies. You draw a deeper breath, and it feels like a different kind of air, something raw and potent entering your lungs, a tangible contrast to the dead air of the city. You push open the sagging wooden door, which groans softly in protest, and step into a tiny, dimly lit room. The air inside is thick, almost palpable, with these same powerful herbal odors, so concentrated they seem to hum around you. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the low, smoke-blackened rafters, rustling softly in an unseen draught, their shadows dancing on the rough plaster walls. Small clay pots bubble gently over a meager fire in the hearth, releasing steaming, aromatic vapors that curl towards the ceiling. Strange, rough-hewn wooden figures sit on shelves, alongside jars of murky liquids and polished stones, each object seeming to hold a silent, arcane power. A figure emerges from the shadows near the hearth, an old woman, her face a roadmap of countless wrinkles, her eyes sharp and knowing, glinting in the firelight. She wears a simple, homespun dress, and her hands, gnarled and strong, are stained green and brown from crushing leaves and roots. She doesn't speak to you, not with words. Instead, her gaze sweeps over you, piercing and direct, as if reading the unspoken questions in your mind, the desperation etched on your face. Her lips are pressed into a thin line, but her eyes hold a profound weariness, an ancient wisdom that has seen too much, understood too much, to be easily surprised. She gestures with a slow, deliberate movement towards a low stool near the fire, then turns back to a small wooden mortar. You watch as she grinds fresh leaves with a heavy pestle, the soft, satisfying crunch of green against wood filling the small space. The earthy, damp scent of the crushed herbs intensifies, becoming almost overwhelming. She mixes the green paste with a thick, viscous liquid from a small, dark bottle, her movements precise, unhurried, as if time itself bends to her will. This isn't the prayer of the church or the frantic dabbing of a barber surgeon. This is something older, something rooted deep in the earth, whispered from generation to generation. She then turns, holding out a small, roughly fashioned poultice, warm and damp, its thick, gritty texture visible through the thin cloth. You take it, feeling the warmth seep into your palm, the pungent, almost bitter aroma rising to your nostrils. It's not a cure, not a promise, but a possibility, a desperate wager against the inevitable. You realize that this is a different kind of courage, and a different kind of fear. The relentless, mournful tolling of Messina's bells has faded into a dull, almost forgotten thrum, a constant undercurrent to the city's profound, pervasive hush. The stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash still cling to you, familiar, grim companions in a world stripped bare. You've witnessed the depths of despair, the cruelties born of fear, and the agonizing struggle of faith. But today, a new sound cuts through the desolation, a jarring, booming voice, amplified by desperation, pulling you towards a small, relatively crowded square near the outer market district. As you approach, the air itself feels different here, thick, with a strange, cloying mixture. There's the familiar scent of unwashed bodies and fear, but overlaid with something sharper, more pungent, cheap perfume, the metallic tang of an unknown liquid, and the faint, sweet scent of something burning, perhaps herbs or resins meant to purify. You see a makeshift stage, crudely constructed from old barrels and planks, adorned with gaudy, brightly colored cloths that flap defiantly in the stale air. Atop this platform stands a man, resplendent in robes far too grand for these desperate times, his face clean-shaven and plump, radiating an almost theatrical confidence. His voice, deep and resonant, booms across the small gathering, promising miracles, offering salvation, spinning tales of distant lands where secrets to ward off all maladies were found. He gestures grandly with a hand adorned with oversized glittering rings, drawing all eyes to the objects he holds aloft. He presents them. Small, stoppered bottles filled with murky, iridescent liquids that catch the weak sun, shimmering with an artificial, almost magical glow. He holds up tiny, intricately carved talismans, claiming they were blessed by ancient saints, touched by a divine hand. He brandishes small pouches of dried, pungent herbs, declaring them potent enough to ward off any evil. The objects themselves seem almost beautiful in their exoticism, a startling contrast to the grim, practical reality of the plague-ridden city. Around you a small crowd has gathered, a testament to the desperate, enduring human need for hope. Their faces are gaunt, their eyes hollowed by fear and grief, but now a flicker of something else ignites within them, a fragile, almost pathetic glimmer of belief. They clutch meager coins in their trembling hands, small, copper pieces or perhaps a single, worn silver, the sum total of their remaining wealth, earned through unimaginable hardship. You watch as a woman, her face pale, a dark stain of a bubo visible beneath her jawline, pushes forward, her eyes fixed on one of the shimmering bottles. She presses a small, gleaming gold coin, a king's ransom in this dying city, into the charlatan's outstretched hand, her fingers lingering, her face a mask of desperate, fragile hope. The charlatan takes the coin with a practiced, smooth movement, his smile widening almost imperceptibly, a fleeting flash of triumph. He hands her the bottle, his gaze already sweeping over the next potential customer. The woman clutches the bottle to her chest, her fingers trembling, as if holding not just glass and liquid, but a fragile piece of her own future. a desperate gamble against certain death. You feel a profound bitterness rise in your throat, a taste sharper even than the persistent ash. It's the unsettling truth of hope. Sold for a price no one can truly afford, traded for a promise that cannot be kept. This is the medieval fear that truly sickens. Not just the physical horrors of the plague, but the moral rot it exposed, the agonizing vulnerability of humanity in its darkest hour. It's the cruel, manipulative exploitation of desperate souls, clinging to a false glimmer of light, buying a fragile dream of immunity with the last vestiges of their wealth, knowing, deep down, that in this merciless world, a bottle, no matter how shiny, can offer no true protection from the inevitable. The ceaseless, mournful tolling of Messina's bells has finally faded, not into silence, but into a different kind of unsettling quiet. A profound, pervasive hush now blankets the city, punctuated not by life, but by the occasional, jarring sound of things breaking, or distant, indistinguishable shouts. The stench of decay has softened, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of neglect, of ancient stone slowly returning to its wilder state, mingled with the faint, unsettling sweetness of dried leaves disturbed by the wind. The bitter taste of ash still lingers stubbornly on your tongue, a phantom memory, a constant reminder. You walk through what was once the main market square, now an expanse of unnerving emptiness. Familiar sounds of commerce are gone, replaced by an ominous stillness, broken only by your own footsteps. But then, from a narrow alleyway leading off the square, you hear a sharp splintering sound, followed by a muffled clang, like metal striking wood. Your senses prickle, a new kind of dread rising in your chest. This isn't the quiet desperation you've grown accustomed to. This is something more primal, more active, a sign of a different kind of sickness taking hold. You approach the alley cautiously, drawn by a morbid curiosity. The air here is thick with dust, and the acrid smell of burnt wood, mixed with the metallic tang of forced entry. As you round the corner, the sight confirms your fears. The heavy wooden door of what was once a prosperous baker's shop, usually reinforced with stout iron bands and a massive lock, now hangs drunkenly from a single hinge, its timber brutally splintered. The lock itself lies on the cobblestones, bent and broken. Inside, a shadowy figure, gaunt and quick, moves amongst the overturned flour sacks and scattered loaves, stuffing bundles of bread into a coarse sack. There's no stealth, no attempt at concealment. His movements are brazen, almost defiant, as if he knows there's no one left to stop him. You glance around, instinctively searching for a guard, a sheriff, a bailiff, any symbol of the authority that once enforced order. The town hall, usually bustling, stands with its grand oak doors ajar, revealing an empty, echoing interior. The City Watch barracks, typically a hive of activity, are silent, their windows dark, their gates swinging uselessly in the wind. The usual patrols, the reassuring presence of armed men in the streets, are gone. They are either dead or have fled, or are cowering in their own homes, leaving a gaping, terrifying void where law once stood. The world you knew, governed by rules and consequences, has simply evaporated. You feel a profound sense of vulnerability wash over you, a chilling realization of how fragile the fabric of society truly is. Without its enforcers, without its structure, it collapses into something feral, opportunistic. The man in the baker's shop pauses, looks up, and his eyes, hollowed by hunger and desperation, meet yours. There's no fear in his gaze, no shame, only a flicker of defiance, a challenge in the depths of his pupils. He knows, as you do, that the old rules no longer apply. He gives a short, dry cough, a familiar sound that now seems to carry a new, brutal meaning of survival. You step back, your hand instinctively going to a non-existent weapon, a primal fear seizing you. This isn't the terror of an invisible disease or the wrath of God. This is the chilling, tangible fear of your fellow man, unbound by law, driven by the desperation of survival in a world where order has disintegrated. This is the ultimate medieval fear, not the plague doctor's mask, but the terrifying knowledge that when the guardians of society vanish, when the rules that bind humanity together collapse, you are left utterly alone, at the mercy of a desperate, lawless world, where the only justice is the one you can enforce yourself, and the only rule is survival. The lingering, bitter taste of ash still clings stubbornly to your tongue, a phantom memory of Messina's dying breath. The city itself feels like a world left behind, its mournful bells silenced, its decay now slowly being reclaimed by nature. You've ventured out, away from the choked streets, into the surrounding countryside, a landscape that initially feels like a different realm. Here, the air is sharper, cleaner, carrying the scent of damp earth and the distant, almost forgotten aroma of growing things, a profound contrast to the city's grim embrace. You find yourself walking along a narrow, muddy track leading through what were once the fields of a powerful lord. The ground beneath your feet is soft, yielding, absorbing the muted sounds of the world around you. A cold, persistent breeze whips past, rustling through the tall, brittle stalks of last season's neglected crops, a dry, whispering sound that speaks of abandonment. Yet, despite this prevailing sense of desolation, something unexpected draws your eye. In the distance, a small cluster of figures moves slowly across a freshly turned field. These aren't the hunched, resigned laborers you'd expect, driven by a harsh overseer. You watch as they move, their bodies bent in the familiar rhythm of sowing or preparing the soil, but their movements feel different. They are deliberate, unhurried, almost purposeful, their shoulders straighter, their heads not bowed in deference but held with a subtle, cautious pride. The clatter of a heavy wooden plow being dragged through the rich, dark soil is surprisingly loud, almost assertive in the quiet expanse. You notice the absence of riders on horseback, the lack of shouted commands, the chilling quiet where a lord steward or bailiff would typically be, overseeing every stroke, demanding every ounce of effort. The vast, imposing manor house of the lord, usually a symbol of control and authority, stands visible on a distant hill, its windows dark and lifeless, its fields now worked by hands that once merely toiled for another's profit. The very fields themselves seem to breathe a sigh of relief, no longer under the shadow of arbitrary power. You draw closer, and as one of the peasants straightens, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of a calloused hand, his gaze meets yours. There's no fear there, no quick subservient dip of the head. Instead, his eyes hold a profound weariness, yes, but also a flicker of something new, a deep, quiet resolve, an unshakable determination. He nods, not in deference, but in acknowledgement, a silent communion of survival. You feel the damp earth beneath your worn boots, the chill of the wind, and a strange, almost exhilarating sensation of possibility. The air here smells not just of damp earth, but of nascent growth, of a future being painstakingly retilled one furrow at a time. The ground itself feels more alive, more responsive to the hands that work it. This isn't the anarchy of the city, the lawlessness of broken structures. This is a quieter, more profound revolution. You realize that medieval fear, for many, was not just the disease itself, but the suffocating weight of servitude, the constant threat of hunger and punishment at the hands of their masters. Now, with those masters gone, consumed by the same indiscriminate horror, a terrifying yet undeniable liberation has taken root. The true fear is gone, replaced by the terrifying but exhilarating burden of freedom. The profound, unsettling quiet of owning your own labor, of claiming your own land, in a world where the old chains have been shattered, not by rebellion, but by the relentless, silent hand of death. It's the birth of a terrifying new beginning, forged in the ashes of the old world. The city's hush is still deep, but something in the air feels subtly different. The pervasive scent of decay and the bitter taste of ash now contend with a faint, sharper tang. Metal and smoke, not from pyres, but from something purposeful. You walk through a narrow street that once housed coopers and carpenters, now mostly shuttered and silent, the wind whispering through empty doorways. The echoes of lost lives still cling to the damp stone walls. But as you round a particularly grim corner, a new sensation prickles your ears. A sharp, ringing clang. It cuts through the quiet with a shocking force, vibrant and immediate. Your body tenses, surprised by the sudden, unfamiliar sound. Then, a beat of silence, and then, clang. It reverberates, a powerful, rhythmic beat that seems to shake the very foundations of the surrounding, silent buildings. It's the unmistakable sound of metal on metal, struck with intent and power. You follow the sound, drawn by its sheer audacity in this desolate world. Ahead, a heavy wooden door, though scarred and weathered, stands slightly ajar. A warm, flickering orange glow spills out from the opening, painting a defiant patch of light on the gray cobblestones. You step closer, pushing the door gently open, and the heat hits you first. A dry, intense warmth that momentarily chases away the chill that has settled deep in your bones for weeks. Inside, the small, smoky interior of the blacksmith's forge is alive. The air is thick, with the scent of hot iron, burnt coal, and sweat, an honest, raw smell of labor that feels almost alien after the odors of sickness and death. At the roaring heart of the room, the forge glows fiercely, a cyclopean eye burning with vibrant orange and yellow light. Before it stands a man, his face grimy with soot and sweat, his powerful bare arms gleaming. He grips a massive hammer, its head heavy and scarred, and with a grunt of effort, brings it down, again and again, on a piece of glowing red-hot iron clamped to an anvil. Clang! The sound is deafening here, vibrating through your chest to the soles of your feet. Sparks fly, a shower of defiant, golden light erupting with each strike, scattering across the dark stone walls like tiny fleeting stars. His movements are strong, rhythmic, an almost hypnotic dance of creation amidst the desolation. His brow is furrowed with concentration, his jaw set. But in his eyes, illuminated by the fiery glow, there's a flicker of something ancient and unyielding. Pure, unadulterated resolve. He is not trying to escape or to prey, or to merely survive in silence. He is building. He is fixing. He is creating something new and useful, bringing order to chaos, shaping raw metal with sheer force and will. Each clang of his hammer is a defiant statement against the pervasive quiet of death, a powerful assertion of life's enduring will to persist, to rebuild. It's not a grand gesture of defiance, but a simple, practical act of stubborn resilience, a heartbeat of hope echoing in a world that had almost forgotten how to beat. And you realize, with a sudden, profound clarity, that the true medieval fear wasn't just the plague itself, but the agonizing thought that life might simply stop. This sound, this rhythmic clang, is the most powerful lie against that fear, a testament to the stubborn, unyielding will of humanity to keep making, to keep forging, to keep living, no matter the cost. The rhythmic, defiant clang of the blacksmith's hammer from earlier has faded into a distant memory, a brave spark in a world still mostly shrouded in oppressive quiet. The pervasive stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash still cling to you, but now a new sensory experience dominates, subtle and profound, the quiet, desperate intensity of an unshakable human connection. You find yourself standing before a familiar, humble doorway, one that once whispered of laughter and shared warmth, now muted by the prevailing gloom. You push the rough wooden door inward, and it opens with a soft creak, almost a sigh. The air inside is stifling, heavy with the humid scent of feverish sweat, mingled with the faint medicinal tang of crushed herbs, not the potent, challenging aromas of the cunning woman, but something gentler, more desperate. It's the intimate smell of a body fighting for its life, cared for by another. The dim light from a single sputtering candle in the corner casts long, dancing shadows that seem to swallow the small room, making the familiar unfamiliar, a place of quiet, agonizing vigil. On a simple cot, a figure lies utterly still beneath a thin, faded blanket. It's a woman, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps that are almost swallowed by the oppressive silence. Her face is flushed, her lips cracked, and on her neck, just beneath the jawline, a dark, angry bubo throbs, a visible manifestation of the unseen battle raging within her. Yet, your gaze is drawn not to the horror of the disease, but to the figure kneeling beside the cot. It is her husband, his face etched with profound weariness and grief, his eyes red-rimmed but fiercely focused on her. His hand reaches out, not with fear or hesitation, but with a deliberate, gentle grace. His calloused fingers, usually strong from labor, are now tender as they brush a damp, cooling cloth across her brow. You feel the clammy texture of her skin, the unnatural heat radiating from her body, almost a physical shock. He pauses, his thumb lightly stroking the side of her temple, a movement so natural, so utterly devoid of fear, it feels like a profound act of defiance in this plague-ridden world. He knows the risk. You realize he understands the terrifying implications of that simple touch. The city screams of contagion, of isolation, of abandoning the sick. Yet here, in this tiny, dim room, he utterly refutes it all. He murmurs something low, a soft, indistinct sound of comfort, and gently pushes a few damp strands of hair from her face. His touch feather-light, almost reverent. You can almost feel the softness of her hair against your own fingers, the profound vulnerability of her feverish state, the immense tenderness in his gesture. There's no priest to offer absolution, no doctor to offer a cure, no hope of a miracle. There is only this raw, unwavering human connection. The air in the room, thick with the scent of sickness, is also permeated by an invisible, palpable presence, the unshakable force of enduring love. This isn't about grand acts or public displays. It's about a quiet, private, agonizing choice, made moment by agonizing moment. You feel a profound, aching lump in your throat, a welling of emotion that cuts through all the desolation you've witnessed. This is the medieval fear that truly haunted, not just death, but the terrifying prospect of dying unloved, uncared for, untouched. But in this small, dim room, in the face of absolute despair, you witness the ultimate human triumph, the enduring power of love, choosing connection over fear, choosing to offer comfort, even if it means risking everything. This quiet, gentle touch, a final act of profound humanity, is the most powerful lie against the plague's merciless indifference. The cold, heavy air of Messina still presses in on you, thick with the enduring stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash, the distant echo of bells, the subtle clang of a blacksmith. All seem muted, overshadowed by the persistent, chilling presence of death. You move through a narrow, deserted street, one that once led to a small, private residence where a local healer, a man of some learning, used to reside. His door, typically a place of both hope and fear, now stands slightly ajar, a sliver of shadow hinting at the emptiness within. As you step closer, a new smell assaults your senses, sharp and immediate, distinct from the general putrefaction of the city. It's an overwhelming odor, a concentrated blend of everything the plague has touched, clinging with an almost sentient tenacity. It's the acrid tang of human sickness, sweat, fever, the metallic sweetness of blood, and the unmistakable, sickly cloying perfume of festering buboes. But it's more than that. It's layered with the strong, sharp scent of potent, desperate remedies. The biting sting of vinegar, the pungent, almost bitter aroma of crushed herbs like rue and wormwood, the smoky residue of burnt aromatics, all mixed with a profound, almost desperate sweetness that hints at attempts to mask the unmaskable. Then, a figure emerges from the dimly lit doorway. It is the healer, the same man you saw days ago, his face now gaunter, his eyes shadowed with an exhaustion that goes beyond mere fatigue. He wears his long, dark robes, once clean, now stained and discolored, dull with dried crusts and smears you try not to identify. As he steps into the pale light of the street, the full force of the stench emanating from him hits you. It's not just Noel on him. It seems to emanate from him, soaked into every fiber of his wool and linen, into his very skin. A second, invisible garment woven from the countless sickbeds he has attended, the desperate breaths he has witnessed, the futile poultices he has applied. You instinctively recoil, a wave of nausea washing over you, a metallic taste rising in your throat. Your nose wrinkles, trying to shut out the overwhelming miasma, but it's inescapable. This man, a figure of supposed solace and healing, now carries the concentrated essence of the plague itself, a walking testament to its ubiquitous spread and his own powerlessness against it. He doesn't notice your reaction. His gaze is distant, unfocused, lost in a private world of horror. He merely pulls his robes tighter around himself, a gesture of both defense and weariness, as if trying to contain the very despair that radiates from him. A few other figures in the street, equally gaunt and wary, instinctively give him a wide berth, their eyes flicking from his robes to their own bodies, a silent, fearful assessment. They do not approach him for help. They avoid him, as if he himself is a walking contagion, a harbinger of the very end. You realize, with a chilling jolt, that this overwhelming stench is more than just unpleasant. It is the palpable odor of his complete and utter failure, the suffocating aroma of a man steeped so deeply in the plague that he has become a living monument to its relentless victory. This is the ultimate medieval fear, not just the anonymous horror of the plague doctor's mask, but the personal, visceral terror of encountering a healer, a supposed figure of hope, whose very being, whose very smell, is a profound, undeniable declaration of the plague's unvanquishable power, a crushing weight of evidence that all remedies, all knowledge, all effort have been tragically, irrevocably overcome. The cold, heavy air of Messina still presses in on you, thick with the enduring stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash. The mournful bells are now a distant memory, replaced by a profound, pervasive hush that seems to swallow all sound, a testament to the city's profound loss. You've walked past healers and charlatans, witnessed acts of brutal desperation and quiet love. Now you find yourself drawn to a small, unassuming doorway tucked away on a quiet street, a place you recall belonging to a respected scholar, a man of letters and vast knowledge. The door, usually shut tight, stands slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of darkness within. You push it gently, and it swings inward with a soft creak, revealing a room steeped in a profound, unsettling stillness. The air inside is cool, dry, carrying the unmistakable scent of aged paper, of old parchment, of leather-bound books. It's a familiar, comforting aroma, usually associated with learning and quiet contemplation. But here, in this context, it feels strangely inert, almost mournful. Your eyes sweep across the room, drawn to the walls, which are entirely lined with books. Floor-to-ceiling shelves groan under the weight of countless tomes, their spines a kaleidoscope of faded colors, dark browns, deep reds, muted greens. Manuscripts, rolled and tied with ribbons, lie scattered on a heavy oak table, alongside quills, inkpots, and maps. This is a treasure trove of medieval wisdom, a lifetime of gathered knowledge, encompassing medicine, philosophy, astronomy, theology, history, every facet of human understanding known in this age. Amidst this vast collection, a figure sits hunched over the table, his head resting heavily on an open book, his hand still clutching a quill. It's the scholar, his face pale and drawn, his eyes closed in what appears to be an exhausted sleep. Books are piled high around him, some open, some half-read, as if he searched frantically for an answer, a spell, a scientific truth, anything that might explain or combat the horror consuming his world. You notice one book, a large, weighty tome on the human body, its pages filled with intricate diagrams and Latin script, lying open at his elbow, a crude drawing of an inflamed lymph node visible on its page. You step closer, your footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust that coats every surface, blurring the sharp edges of the learned world. You reach out, your fingers hovering over the cool, stiff parchment of an open page. The ink is still stark, the words clear, but they feel hollow, empty of power. The wisdom contained within these thousands of pages, the accumulated knowledge of centuries, feels utterly impotent here, powerless against the raw, biological reality that has swept through the city, reducing learned men and unlettered peasants alike to the same inevitable fate. You feel a profound, aching sadness rise in your throat, a chilling realization that cuts deeper than any physical pain. This isn't just about the absence of a cure or the failure of prayer. This is about the terrifying, undeniable limitation of human understanding itself. It's the medieval fear that truly shattered the world, the horrifying truth that when faced with an incomprehensible, merciless force of nature, all the accumulated wisdom of humankind, every carefully inscribed word, every deeply studied theory, every carefully drawn diagram, can amount to nothing more than a pile of useless paper, leaving humanity utterly naked, defenseless, and utterly alone against a biological reality that simply refuses to conform to its fragile grasp of knowledge. The cold, heavy air of Messina still presses in on you, thick with the enduring stench of decay and the bitter taste of ash, though both are subtly altered, softened by the city's profound abandonment. The mournful bells are gone, replaced by a pervasive, unsettling hush, that swallows all human sound, making the occasional jarring noise of a falling shutter or a distant creak feel amplified, almost menacing. You've witnessed the collapse of society, the failure of faith and knowledge. Now something else draws your attention: the silent, unnerving behavior of the city's animal inhabitants. You walk through a deserted street, usually alive with a scurry of unseen creatures. But today, the lack of typical animal sounds is striking. No familiar chirping of sparrows, no distant braying of a donkey, no casual bark of a dog. The silence is profound, almost eerie. Then, from a shadowed alleyway, you catch a glimpse of movement. A rat, usually furtive and quick, scurries out into the open street, not along the wall, but boldly, directly into the light. Its movements are jerky, uncoordinated, its small body swaying as it navigates the cobblestones. Its fur is matted, its eyes glazed, and it moves with an unnerving slowness, almost a drunken stumble, before collapsing in a heap and lying utterly still. The utter lack of fear in its final movements is chilling. Further down the street, near a row of deserted houses, a cat sits motionless on a windowsill, its body unnaturally stiff, its fur dull and ruffled. Its head is tilted at an odd angle, its eyes wide open, but unseeing, fixed on some unseen point in the desolate distance. It doesn't move as you approach, doesn't even twitch its tail. It's a statue of terror, a silent witness to a terror too vast to comprehend. The usual feline agility, its predatory alertness, has completely vanished, replaced by an unsettling, lifeless stillness that speaks of an internal surrender. And then, from a wider, more open square, you hear a low, mournful whimper. A dog, a once proud hound, perhaps, now little more than a skeletal frame, crawls slowly out from beneath an overturned cart. Its fur is patchy, its ribs starkly visible beneath its skin, and its tail, usually wagging with the enthusiasm of its kind, drags limply on the ground. Its head is bowed, its muzzle resting on the cold stone, and its eyes, when they meet yours, are filled not with aggression or recognition, but with an immense, profound sadness, a deep, primal grief that mirrors the human sorrow that blankets the city. It doesn't bark, doesn't growl, doesn't even try to stand. It merely whimpers again, a soft, heart-breaking sound of utter despair. You feel a profound sense of unease, a chilling confirmation that the plague affects not just humanity, but the very animal kingdom that coexists with it. The normal order of their world has been upended, their instincts dulled, their natural behaviors replaced by an unnerving lethargy or a tragic acceptance of their fate. This is the medieval fear that truly cuts to the bone. Not just the horror of human suffering and death, but the terrifying, undeniable evidence that the unseen enemy has permeated every living thing, altering the very fabric of existence, leaving behind a silent, animal testament to a world turned upside down. A chilling, non-human witness to an apocalypse that spares no living thing, even those without comprehension. The heavy quiet that settled over Messina now extends its reach, a profound, pervasive hush even in the supposedly open countryside. The scent of decay from the city is largely gone, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of soil and grass. But the air still carries a strange thinness, an underlying emptiness. You walk along a winding, overgrown track, the kind that usually leads to a small, isolated farm, following an instinct you can't quite name. The wind whistles softly through tall, brittle stalks of what were once crops, a dry, whispering sound that carries no comfort. Then, from over a low rise, a sound reaches you, weak and disjointed. It's the bleating of sheep, but not the confident collective bleat of a well-tended flock. This is a ragged, almost desperate sound, scattered and mournful, like individual cries lost on the wind, lacking the reassuring calls of a shepherd. It pulls you forward, urging you to crest the hill. As you step over the rise, the scene unfolds before you, a sprawling green pasture dotted with a few dozen sheep. They are scattered haphazardly across the field, some grazing listlessly, others standing motionless, staring into the middle distance with dull, unseeing eyes. Their wool, usually clean and well kept, is matted and dirty, snagged with burrs and twigs. There's no order to their movements, no sense of being guided or protected. They drift, aimless and vulnerable, their bleats echoing with a profound, almost human loneliness. You scan the field, searching for the familiar figure, the shepherd and his dog, who would normally be a constant presence here. But there's nothing. No crook leaning against a tree, no faint smoke from a distant hut, no familiar bark of a sheepdog herding the stragglers. The small, rough-hewn shepherd's hut, usually a hub of humble activity, sits dark and silent on the far edge of the field, its door hanging slightly ajar, a silent, gaping maw that seems to exhale emptiness. The lack of a human presence here is deafening, a palpable void in a landscape that thrives on human-animal cooperation. The wind sweeps through the field, making the dry grass rustle like hushed whispers. You can almost feel the chill it carries, a deeper cold than the autumn air, the cold of abandonment, of forgotten purpose. The sheep wander closer to you, their large, bewildered eyes reflecting your own unease. They don't approach with fear, nor with their usual skittishness, but with a strange, passive resignation, as if they've simply forgotten what human presence means, or perhaps resign themselves to its absence. Their bleats, now closer, sound even more forlorn, plaintive questions tossed into an indifferent world. You feel a profound ache in your chest, a chilling understanding of the subtle yet catastrophic shift in the natural order. This isn't just about dead humans. It's about the web of life unraveling, the intricate relationships between man and animal broken. This is the ultimate medieval fear that lurks beyond the city walls. Not the direct horror of the plague itself, but the terrifying emptiness left in its wake, the profound loneliness of a world where the human hand, once a source of guidance and care, has simply vanished, leaving herds unclaimed, adrift, and utterly alone, their mournful bleats echoing across a landscape that has forgotten the sound of a shepherd's call, a silent, chilling testament to the devastating reach of an invisible enemy. The heavy quiet that settled over Messina persists, a profound, pervasive hush that makes the slightest sound resonate with unnerving clarity. The clinging stench of decay has faded, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of neglected stone, and the faint, unsettling sweetness of newly turned soil where nature begins its slow reclamation. But now, as you walk, a different kind of odor, sharp and chemical, reaches you. The distinct, almost jarring scent of fresh paint, of linseed oil and ground pigments, a smell of human creation cutting through the lingering atmosphere of death. You find yourself drawn towards the cloister wall of a small, partially abandoned monastery, a place usually reserved for solemn contemplation. But today, a few figures stand silently before it, their bodies still, their gazes fixed. As you approach, the sight makes you stop dead. A sudden shock that steals the breath from your lungs. Spanning the length of the ancient wall, painted directly onto the rough plaster, is a vast, stark mural, still wet and vibrant, a testament to raw, recent creation. This isn't the cheerful, gilded art you're accustomed to, depicting saints or biblical scenes of glory. No, this is something chillingly different, almost grotesque. A line of skeletal figures, their bony fingers and grinning skulls starkly rendered, move with an eerie, dancing gait. They are leading, pulling, almost embracing a procession of living souls. You recognize the figures. A richly robed pope, his tiara askew, his expression one of horrified realization. A crowned king, his face etched with terror, his scepter falling from his grasp. A heavily armored knight, his sword uselessly dragging the ground. A plump merchant, his money bag scattering coins. And finally, a simple peasant, his tools abandoned, his face a mask of weary acceptance. Each skeleton, each figure of death, mimics its living counterpart with a macabre irony, a skeletal hand grasping the Pope's and dancing with him into the void, a bony arm draped around the king's shoulder, leading him away. The paint is thick, the colors stark, whites, blacks, and somber reds, drawing out every gruesome detail. You feel an icy prickle on your skin, a shiver that has nothing to do with the chill in the air, but with the profound, unsettling message etched into the wall. It's a chilling equality, a brutal democracy of decay. You watch the few onlookers, their faces gaunt and hollow, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a grim, almost cathartic recognition. No one speaks. Their hands, though, often reach out, not to touch the wet paint, but to grasp their own forearms, their chests, as if to confirm their own living, breathing presence against the undeniable reality painted before them. They absorb the image, their shoulders slumping, their heads bowing, a silent understanding passing between them. This artwork, fresh and raw, speaks a truth that no sermon or decree could convey. You realize that this dance macabre isn't just a painting. It's a profound, visceral declaration of medieval fear, brought to life in stark, horrifying detail. It's the terrifying understanding that the plague has utterly obliterated the social order, rendering all earthly status meaningless. Pope, king, peasant, all are equal in the dance with death. This is the chilling, undeniable truth that pierced the medieval soul. Not the mask of a plague doctor, but the stark, skeletal grin of death itself, inviting every soul, regardless of wealth or power, into its indiscriminate, horrifying embrace, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding knowledge that no earthly rank or privilege could ever truly protect you from the inevitable. The pervasive, unsettling hush that blankets Messina now feels less like silence and more like a muted hum, a world breathing shallowly. The lingering stench of decay has softened, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of neglected stone and persistent weeds reclaiming forgotten paths. The bitter taste of ash still clings to your tongue, a phantom sensation, a constant reminder. But as you walk through a rarely visited courtyard, your gaze catches on an unexpected sight, a vibrant contrast to the overwhelming desolation. Ahead, a small, neglected garden struggles for life, bursting with late autumn roses. Their petals, once a vibrant, passionate red, are now slightly faded, edged with brown, but they still hold a fragile beauty. Their delicate scent, though faint, is surprisingly sweet, a tender defiance against the prevailing odors of the city. You reach out, your fingers brushing against a velvety petal, feeling its soft, fleeting texture, a whisper of life against the cold, hard reality of the surrounding emptiness. The coolness of the petal, momentarily comforting, belies the deeper chill that has settled over everything. But as you look at it, truly look, your gaze doesn't just see the bloom. You see the fragility of the stem, the tiny insects already at work on the decaying edges of the leaves, the stark certainty of its impending death, its fleeting moment of glory. The intense red seems to bleed into a darker hue, almost the color of old blood. A stark reminder of the buboes you've seen, the vibrant yet terrifying marks of the plague. The beauty is still there, yes, but it's irrevocably tainted, overshadowed by the stark understanding of its transience, its ultimate surrender to decay. A vivid, living memento mori. You notice a young woman, perhaps a servant, tending to the roses with meticulous care, her hands gentle as she snips off a withered bloom. Her face is pale and thin, her eyes shadowed, but her movements are deliberate, almost reverent, as if performing a sacred yet sorrowful ritual. She doesn't seem to be tending to the garden for joy, but for duty, or perhaps for a deeper, more somber appreciation. As she turns, her gaze meets yours, and in her eyes, you see the same shift, the same grim appreciation for beauty held so briefly, so precariously, against the backdrop of universal loss. She offers a faint, almost imperceptible nod, a silent communion of shared understanding, a profound, unsettling knowledge passing between you without a single spoken word. The air around you, though filled with the rose's sweet scent, is also thick with this unspoken understanding, this pervasive sense of mortal fragility. The soft petals, the delicate fragrance, they are no longer just symbols of beauty. They are poignant reminders that even the most exquisite life is destined for the dust. They are beautiful, precisely because they are fleeting, precious because they are temporary. Their vibrant existence, a defiant but ultimately doomed cry against the all-consuming darkness that has swept away so much. You feel a profound, aching lump in your throat, a welling of emotion that cuts through all the desolation you've witnessed, a mix of sorrow and this new, unsettling reverence for life's brief, desperate bloom. You realize with a heavy heart that this is the deeper fear that gripped medieval people. It wasn't just death as an end, a singular, terrifying event. It was death as a pervasive presence, a constant shadow, a prism through which all of life, all of beauty, all of joy was now irrevocably viewed. It's the chilling transformation of existence, where every moment of fleeting beauty, every vibrant color, every tender touch, carries the indelible, poignant reminder of its inevitable decay, forever altering the meaning of what it means to be alive. The world isn't just dying. The cold, heavy air of Messina still presses in on you, but it feels different now. The pervasive stench of decay has faded almost entirely, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of wet stone and the clean, sharp scent of wood smoke, a surprising new warmth. The bitter taste of ash has finally receded from your tongue, a phantom memory that occasionally resurfaces, a subtle reminder of the profound quiet that blankets the city. But the silence itself is no longer absolute. Now you hear faint, unfamiliar sounds. The distant shouts of children, higher pitched and less numerous than before. The rhythmic clang of a distant hammer. Signs of life beginning to tentatively assert itself. You walk through what was once a deserted thoroughfare, now sparsely populated by unfamiliar faces. People move with a hesitant caution, their eyes scanning, assessing, a subtle tension in their posture. The houses, once dark and shuttered, show signs of recent occupation. A wisp of smoke from a chimney, a clean cloth drying on a windowsill. These aren't the familiar faces of your old neighbors. These are strangers, survivors from outlying villages, or those who fled and are now cautiously returning, drawn by the emptiness, the promise of available land and opportunity. As you pass an open doorway, you catch sight of a small gathering within. Not a feast, not a celebration of joy, but something quieter, more sober. Two figures, A young man and a young woman stand awkwardly before a wizened, solemn priest. Their clothing is simple, freshly mended, but not new. Their faces are pale, their expressions hesitant, almost bewildered. They are clearly not a couple deeply in love, not brimming with the usual youthful exuberance of a wedding. Their eyes, though, hold a shared understanding, a quiet resignation, an urgent purpose. You notice the woman's hand, small and trembling, as it rests tentatively in the man's larger, calloused one. Their fingers do not interlace with passion, but with a practical grasp, a quiet commitment. Around them, a handful of witnesses, perhaps distant relatives or newly acquainted neighbors, stand stiffly, their expressions a mixture of relief, solemnity, and a distinct awkwardness. There are no boisterous cheers, no traditional songs, no celebratory feasting. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and stale wine, is permeated by an undeniable tension, a forced intimacy. The priest's voice is low, his words hushed, devoid of the usual ceremonial grandeur. You can almost feel the weight of his pronouncements, not just of holy union, but of expectation, of necessity. These are not just two souls joining. This is a desperate act of repopulation, a societal imperative cloaked in religious ritual. You realize with a heavy heart that this is the uneasy pulse of a world trying to reestablish itself, to knit back together a shredded social fabric. It's a marriage born not of romance, but of survival, of a deep, unspoken hunger to fill the echoing emptiness, to create new life in the wake of unimaginable death. You step back, your own presence unnoticed, leaving the awkward ceremony to its quiet conclusion. This is the new reality, the profound, unsettling shift in human relations. This is the ultimate medieval fear that truly endured beyond the plague itself. The terrifying burden of rebuilding a world from ashes. Knowing that the warmth of human connection, once so organic and effortless, must now be painstakingly, sometimes awkwardly, reforged, not just for love, but for the very survival of humanity. It's the strange, quiet beauty of a world remaking itself. One hesitant vow, one new family, one awkward connection at a time, driven by a primal need to defy the silence that almost swallowed everything. The lingering bitter taste of ash has finally receded from your tongue, a ghost of a memory. But the cold, heavy air of Messina still presses in on you, thick with the damp, earthy smell of wet stone and the clean, sharp scent of wood smoke. The profound silence that once blanketed the city is now subtly broken, not by the clamor of the past, but by tentative, uncertain sounds. A child's muffled cry, a distant, hesitant hammer strike. You walk through the recovering streets, amidst faces that are no longer panicked, but etched with a different kind of weariness, a deeper shadow in their eyes. You find yourself drawn to a small, newly reopened market stall, where a handful of people gather, their movements careful, almost ritualistic. The air here smells of fresh bread and damp vegetables, a comforting scent, yet it's overlaid with a faint, persistent tang of fear, like something held too long, too tightly, in the back of your throat. You watch a woman, her hands calloused, selecting a few carrots, her eyes darting quickly around the small cluster of customers, constantly assessing, constantly vigilant. Her hand, as she reaches for a vegetable, brushes lightly against another person's arm. It's an accidental, innocent contact, yet you see the immediate, almost imperceptible flinch. A sudden stiffness takes hold of her body, a momentary recoil, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second, before she quickly composes herself, offering a weak, unconvincing smile. The other person, a man with a heavy beard, simply nods, his gaze distant, but his shoulders too are slightly hunched, his hands retreating quickly into the folds of his tunic. The ordinary touch, once a casual part of human interaction, is now fraught with an invisible tension, a phantom threat, a memory of lethal contagion. You feel the ghost of that chill yourself, a prickling on your skin, a shiver that has nothing to do with the autumn air. Later, as twilight descends, you pass by a house, its windows glowing with the faint light of a newly kindled fire. You hear a sharp, sudden cry from within, a sound that is undeniably human, a guttural shriek of terror that rips through the fragile quiet of the evening. It lasts only a few seconds, then abruptly cuts off, leaving an echoing silence in its wake. You see a light flicker on in a neighboring window, a figure moving quickly to extinguish it, shrinking back into the shadows. No one rushes to offer aid. No one cries out a question. There is only the chilling collective understanding that this was a nightmare, a desperate scream born from the lingering horrors of the plague, a terror that has not faded with the light of day. You feel a profound, aching sadness, a realization that the plague has left not just empty homes and silent streets, but deep, unhealable scars on the human soul. The distrust is palpable, a subtle barrier between every interaction, a constant, unspoken question in every shared space. People look at each other not with malice, but with a weary, ingrained caution, a ghost of fear always lurking beneath the surface. The nightmares you know are not just confined to that house. They are the shared inheritance of every survivor, the relentless replaying of past agonies, the psychological residue of an unimaginable trauma. You realize, with a heavy heart, that this is the ultimate medieval fear that truly endures, not the physical disease, for that is mostly past, but the invisible, insidious plague of the mind. It's the terrifying understanding that even when the body recovers, the soul remains profoundly scarred, haunted by ghosts, riddled with distrust, eternally wary of the next unseen threat. The persistent, dull ache of Messina's ghost still lingers, doesn't it? The phantom grit of ash on your tongue, the echoes of desperate coughs, the profound silence where laughter once lived. You've been immersed in the true, unvarnished terror of 1347. You've felt the primal dread of an invisible enemy, the breaking of kinship, the collapse of faith, the agonizing choices that turned loved ones into vectors of death. This was the medieval plague, raw and indiscriminate. And yet, when you conjure an image of the plague, one figure invariably rises to mind, doesn't it? You can almost see him now, cloaked in heavy, dark leather, a broad-brimmed hat shadowing his features. Then, the mask. That grotesque, bird-like beak, long and pointed, often stuffed with aromatic herbs, dark circular lenses obscuring his eyes, giving him the chilling aspect of some otherworldly carrion bird, a harbinger of doom. You feel a familiar shiver, a primal goosebump, at the sight of this iconic figure, a theatrical embodiment of the terror, a chilling promise of oblivion. But here's the profound, unsettling truth that reframes everything you thought you knew about that time. This striking, indelible image, this terrifying specter of the plague doctor as you know him, he wasn't there. Not in the Messina we just experienced. Not in 1347. This iconic costume, this beaked mask, is a fabrication, a theatrical creation born centuries later, around the 17th century, a symbol crafted long after the first, most brutal wave of the Black Death had passed. The people you walked with, whose fears you felt, never saw this figure. Their terror was far more intimate, more visceral, and utterly unmasked. They feared the bubo blossoming on their own flesh, the dry cough of their child, the silent judgment in a neighbor's eyes, the cold stone of a mass grave. They feared the absence of a priest, the futility of gold, the madness of isolation. They feared the breakdown of all that was familiar, the slow, agonizing erosion of humanity itself. Their fear wasn't projected onto a mythic costumed figure. It was the raw, unadorned dread of a biological reality tearing their world and their bodies apart, utterly exposed and utterly alone. That mask, so commonly associated with their suffering, is a lie, a later attempt to put a face on a faceless horror they knew far too intimately. A way for future generations to perhaps contain, or even distance themselves from, the truly uncontainable, unadorned terror that medieval people actually faced. You've lived through it, haven't you? You felt the unsettling mingling of sweet spices with unseen decay in Messina's harbor. The chilling transformation of a common cough into a harbinger of doom. You touched the rough wood of a boarded-up door, tasted the ash of funeral pyres, and felt the clammy sweat of pure panic. You witnessed the quiet, heartbreaking choice to abandon a child, the agonizing severance of kinship when love became a fatal risk. You absorbed the sound of the bell's relentless monotony, the horrifying spectacle of self-flagellation, the impotence of knowledge in a scholar's silent library, and the terrifying anonymity of the plague pit. You've journeyed through a world where faith crumbled, laws dissolved, and even the natural world bore witness to an unimaginable horror. This was the raw, unvarnished fear of medieval people, stripped bare of all romanticism. And yet, despite all you've just experienced, when you close your eyes and think of the Black Death, what image likely still leaps to mind? That haunting, iconic figure, the plague doctor. Clad in heavy, dark robes, a wide-brimmed hat casting shadows, and then that grotesque, bird-like beak mask. It's long, pointed, often depicted, stuffed with potent herbs, its dark, glassy eyes staring out with an eerie, detached menace. You feel a familiar shiver, a goosebump on your skin. He is the specter of the plague, isn't he? The embodiment of doom. But here's the unsettling truth that fundamentally reframes everything we've just explored together. That striking, indelible image, that terrifying figure with the beaked mask, he wasn't there. Not in the Messina we just walked through. Not in the grim, desperate landscape of 1347. This iconic costume, this beaked mask, is a theatrical invention, a macabre fashion that wouldn't appear for centuries, surfacing much later, around the 17th century. The people whose terror you just felt never saw this figure. Their fear was far more intimate, more pervasive, and utterly unmasked. We cling to this fantastical image, don't we? This theatrical mask, because it gives a tangible form to something that was terrifyingly formless. It allows us to externalize the dread, to personify the horror, to put a face on an indiscriminate, invisible enemy. It's a way to contain the incomprehensible, to distance ourselves from the true, messy, agonizing reality that medieval people faced. It's a comforting fiction, a dramatic visual that simplifies an unspeakable complexity. The beaked mask makes the plague a character, a villain, something separate from the terrified, suffering, betraying humanity. But the real terror, the fear that truly shattered the medieval soul, wasn't a costumed figure. It was the bubo blossoming on your child's flesh, the dry cough from your own throat, the silent judgment in a neighbor's averted eyes, the cold touch of a dying parent you dared not comfort. It was the agonizing absence of a priest to absolve your sins, the chilling realization of your own body's betrayal, the profound, deafening quiet of a city that had forgotten how to live. It was the tearing apart of social bonds, the collapse of all authority, the bitter taste of ash and the pervasive stench of decay that clung to every breath. That mask, so commonly associated with their suffering, is a magnificent lie, a later attempt to give form to the formless, a way for subsequent generations to perhaps comprehend, or even to soften, the raw, unadorned, deeply human terror that medieval people truly faced. Their horror was not in the mask. It was in the mirror. So as you leave Messina, remember not the mask, but the faces behind it. The raw, unshielded humanity that endured, that broke, that sometimes defiantly loved. The true face of medieval fear was not a fantasy, but a stark, undeniable reality, reflected in every desperate eye, felt in every broken heart, and etched into the very soul of a world forever changed.